chair of this committee, joined by the vice chair, Mr. Bob Blumenfeld, and Mr. John Lee, San Fernando Valley, and we're missing 2 members, but we have enough members to begin our meeting. We will begin our meeting, Mr. Mejia, looking and considering and hearing from the public on item number 10.
Okay, item 10, Councilman. This is a report from the Planning Department. It's in regards to the implementation of the home sharing ordinance and the administrative guidelines and the master platform agreement.
All right, I'll note for those in the audience, we have a number of items associated with short-term rentals, and this is the first one, but we'll begin this discussion and consideration with a report from staff.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Arthi Varma, Deputy Director with the Department of City Planning, and I'm here with my fellow Deputy Director, Tricia Keene. We are glad to be back to provide a couple of updates on the implementation of the home sharing ordinance, which was adopted in December of 2018 and went into effect in July of 2019. The city is currently preparing to begin enforcement of these new rules on November 1st. On June 18th, the Plum Committee considered a resolution to adopt Appendix A of the Administrative Guidelines. The Plum Committee continued that item and requested a separate report back from the department on the initial implementation of the program. We have 2 reports before you here today. You will hear from my colleague, Tricia, about the first report, which is a report on outreach efforts and initial implementation of the home sharing program, as well as an update on several additional administrative items. The second report provides a summary of 2 methods for hosting platforms to satisfy their responsibilities with regards to the home sharing ordinance, Appendix A of the Administrative Guidelines, and the Master Platform Agreement. I'm going to now hand it off to my colleague, Tricia.
Good afternoon. Tricia Keene, Deputy Director, City Planning. I'll begin with the first report on outreach and implementation efforts to date.
Morning.
This includes an update on the registration process itself, enforcement efforts, establishment of a per-night administrative fee, and public outreach. Since the city's registration portal launched on July 1st, the registration system has generally been functioning quite well, with most hosts completing the registration process without issue. As of October 15th, the city had issued 2,100 pending registration numbers to hosts who completed a home sharing application. And so the registration system is working as contemplated. For those hosts who qualify, registration can often be completed in about 10 minutes and can be done entirely online. For those units that do not qualify under the city's adopted ordinance, the registration system has been identifying them and not allowing for the registration process to be finished. Approximately 165 potential applications have been identified as not eligible, and those units did not receive pending registration numbers. The 2 most common reasons for units being ineligible are that the unit is subject to the rent stabilization ordinance or that the property has an outstanding citation. The department anticipates that there will be an influx of additional hosts registering over the next 2 weeks in order to meet the November 1st enforcement deadline. The city is prepared to begin enforcement of the ordinance on November 1st, as stated. The city departments involved in enforcement have been meeting regularly to prepare for that to begin. Additionally, the mayor's office convened meetings of the short-term rental enforcement task force, which is made up of representatives from each of the city's enforcement agencies, to coordinate about that enforcement agency's responsibilities. Additionally, beginning on November 1st, Host Compliance, our technology partner, will monitor short-term rental listings across all hosting platforms operating within the city and will identify listings that lack a valid registration number. The city will be able to promptly issue notices to properties that are in violation of the home sharing ordinance beginning November 1st. Host Compliance is also building a web-based enforcement module that will be utilized by the enforcement agencies to verify citations and forward information to the Office of the City Attorney, which is responsible for processing ACE citations. To assist with enforcement efforts, the home sharing ordinance also established a per-night administrative fee. This fee is necessary to help close the gap between the registration fee and the actual cost of administering and enforcing the ordinance. The department has hired a consultant to conduct a fee study, and that will be completed within the next couple of months and brought forward to City Council for consideration. Once the fee is adopted by City Council, Host Compliance is prepared to collect that fee from hosts through the online registration portal. Regarding the outreach that the department has been undertaking, we've been taking a multi-phase and multifaceted approach to conducting outreach in order to meet the varied needs of hosts, potential hosts, and neighborhood residents. Since ordinance adoption, planning staff has been reporting regularly on the ordinance to Neighborhood Council Alliance meetings. Department staff also joined 6 public meetings where we were invited to speak about the home sharing ordinance. On average, attendance at those meetings was about 30 to 50 people, and the format provided us with the opportunity to provide detailed information to and answer questions from the attendees. The department also scheduled a series of outreach events across the city leading up to November 1st to further spread awareness of the home sharing program. These events include 7 in-person information sessions, 2 of which have already been held, and a webinar scheduled to take place on October 24th. At these events, we educated hosts and neighborhood residents about the policies, the registration process, extended home sharing enforcement, and additional information. If more information about these meetings is on the Planning Department's website, which is planningforla.org. But we recognize that not everyone can come to community meetings, so we wanted to make sure we reached out to people in other ways. We've been sharing information about the home sharing ordinance and program in our monthly newsletter. It's been about 5 issues over the past year. That goes out to 8,000 subscribers. We've been engaged in outreach through TV, radio, and print media. From newspaper articles to TV and radio interviews, we've been working with media outlets to get the word out. We've also been regularly providing updates on the department's website, social media posts, and targeted emails. Since the launch of the program, the website has received more than 20,600 unique visits. So we have been actively engaging the public as we continue to implement the ordinance and prepare for November 1st. I will now turn it back to Arthi Varma to provide information about the additional implementation we've been working on.
Thank you, Tricia. I'll be briefly describing our second report on Appendix A in the Master Platform Agreement. So the home sharing ordinance itself contains specific provisions that are applicable to hosting platforms. The ordinance provides 3 ways that hosting platforms such as Airbnb or VRBO can comply with the platform responsibilities required by the ordinance. I'll describe those responsibilities in a minute. The compliance options include 1, following the actual regulations in the ordinance, as well as 2 alternative compliance methods that provide exceptions to the hosting platform responsibilities section of the ordinance. So first is compliance with Appendix A of the Administrative Guidelines, and second is compliance with individually signed platform agreements. Both options provide exceptions from the requirements of the ordinance, as I mentioned. Both Appendix A and the platform agreement must be adopted by council resolution in order to become effective. So as I mentioned, the adopted home sharing ordinance contains a platform responsibilities section, which includes completing only authorized booking service transactions for short-term rentals, providing company contact information to the city within 45 days of the effective date, and providing certain information on listings and bookings to the city on at least a monthly basis. Again, these responsibilities do not apply to a hosting platform whenever it complies with either Appendix A or enters into a platform agreement. The first compliance option, Appendix A, provides 2 actual methods to satisfy the responsibilities in the ordinance. The first method is called the API method. It relies on an automatic communication of data between the city and the platform through a software application called API. This method offers significant benefits for both the city and platforms in terms of efficacy. Platforms utilizing this option would work with the city to establish an API that queries the city's database for valid registration numbers at the time of each booking transaction, thereby preventing booking transactions on any unregistered listings. Through this query, the platform would provide information on the number of nights booked, as well as host information associated with the registration number. The second option is the manual spreadsheet method. This is based on a series of data sharing processes between the city and the platform. The platform would provide information on their listings to the city pursuant to the data sharing requirements of the ordinance, and the city would respond with a notification of any unpermitted listings. After 4 days of notification by the city, the hosting platform would have to discontinue booking transactions on these unpermitted listings. Platforms that are interested in utilizing one of these methods provided in Appendix A would need to work directly with staff to establish access and approval. The department has prepared a draft resolution for council consideration and approval of Appendix A, both of which were provided as attachments to the report. I'll now turn to the Master Platform Agreement. It's a document that would really provide a template for all the individual platform agreements that the city may sign with hosting platforms. The Master Platform Agreement is very similar in concept to Appendix A. However, specific provisions of the ordinance were designed to incentivize platforms to enter into these agreements by providing certain benefits to their hosts. The process also allows for minor customization through individual signed platform agreements based on the framework in the master platform. In exchange for the benefits, platforms who sign a platform agreement must also collect TOT, the per night administrative fee that my colleague just described, and commit to the department's preferred data sharing method, which is the API method. The department has engaged in detailed discussions with several hosting platforms, including Airbnb, Expedia, and Mr. B&B, which is a French short-term rental platform operating in Los Angeles. Discussions with these platforms and other interested parties regarding a possible platform agreement are moving forward. The discussions are progressing positively and in good faith, and the department believes that a master platform agreement may be ready shortly for the committee's consideration. In conclusion, staff would recommend that Appendix A be approved by the committee today and that the master platform agreement be continued to October 29th. Staff is happy to answer any questions. We also have our technical consultant here for questions on the API.
All right, members, any questions or comments before we hear from the public? Seeing none, we'll begin our public comment. We're going to ask for 20 minutes of public comment, 10 for and 10 opposed to the measure before us, and so I'll call your name. You'll have a minute each to speak, and we'll keep a clock of the time so we can get through this discussion. We'll begin our conversation with words from the member from the 5th Council District, Paul Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to urge that we approve the implementation and outreach requirements for the home sharing ordinance. I know I'm not the only member of council who's been hearing from our constituents who think that we approved a home sharing ordinance that went into effect on July 1st and are wondering why we haven't been enforcing it. Now that we're less than 2 weeks away from the November 1st enforcement threshold, we've set this much needed implementation mechanism we need to adopt before then. And yet we have the big kahuna of home sharing programs, Airbnb telling us it'll be the end of the world as we know it if we don't postpone enforcement to allow them to work up their preferred high-tech approach, an application programming interface for meeting their reporting responsibilities. I don't buy it for a minute. The action before you today allows for an alternative lower tech compliance methodology, a spreadsheet that will suffice until the API can be developed and synced up with the city's system. That allows us to begin enforcing our ordinance, which took nearly 4 years to write in the first place. Our constituents shouldn't be made to wait any longer. And this is especially true in the case of hotels, where landlords have completely emptied out an apartment building and are making it entirely home sharing. These are high-profile violations, and they should be enforced by November 1st, regardless of what else we decide to do. I urge you to approve item 10 and send it to the full council as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll begin with Andrew Ward, Stephen Nazinski, Mary Kate Denny, Carlos Rosas, Steve Hirsch, in any order. Melissa Stone, Mara Criologo, Ed Coleman. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Hear me? My name is Stephen Nishinsky. I'm from Woodland Hills. And I just want to say that if you see a number of these people say one size does not fit all, I believe that's the case. I believe it continues to be the case, and that basically the private homeowners are being grouped with the bad apples, and they're being punished in many ways. And I think that there should be special consideration, and I think that one size should not fit all, and you should start dividing these people and putting your energy into the bad apples. And people who register, ones that are registering and want to play ball, should be protected from all the mistakes that are still existing in the program. I do firmly believe that the bad apples should be attended to and that you should not delay on them.
Thank you.
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Ward. I live in the community of Herman, and my wife and I have been hosting part of our home for a couple of years now. It helps us greatly in covering our bills because I work in a freelance business where I can always sustain income 52 weeks of the year. We host definitely more than 120 days a year. I'm going to ask you to help streamline the process of helping hosts extend beyond 120 days, and perhaps you could look again at the $850 fee that's been levied on people who want to host beyond this time. Also, in trying to comply with being a host that goes beyond 120 days a year, a lot of the burden seems to be thrown back on the hosts in terms of having to notify the community and the neighbors, having to show up to one of your offices and provide mailing labels, etc., to notify the neighbors. Perhaps that's something we could do more online than having to kind of go collect that data manually and report to one of your offices. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, City Councilmen and women. My name is Carlos Rosas, and I'm currently an Airbnb host. For the past 4 years, I've been hosting because of my family. You know, I'm a caregiver to two elderly parents, you know, in better need of care. And much of this income, you know, generally helps me, you know, to help them with any medication and any sort of needs that they may encounter. So I just want to say that I find that my nightly rate in Boyle Heights is about $50, which is far less than a comparable unit on the west side. I urge the City Council to create a fair fee structure that reflects different economic circumstances. Please address before enforcement.
Thank you.
I'm Mary Kate Denny Ziesmer. I have been renting out a room in the Rancho Park area, Mr. Claretz's area, for 4 years, and this is where my neighbors will ask me to house some of their guests when they're visiting, all constituents of the area. I have replaced this income due to the downfall in 2009 of my photography income with Getty Images and other stock agencies. What I have found very difficult is the registration. I have attempted this 3 and 4 times. There's no way to save the information when you go in and try to do it. I have had to ask somebody for help, and I've gone over and over because it's like gobbledygook. I am dealing with images more than words like this. It needs to be much more specific and less confusing. Also,
Thank you.
on one more second.
That's your time.
The
Thank you.
home
That's your
sharing,
time. We have to have everybody be 1 minute.
$850 is outrageous.
My name is Melissa. I've lived in Venice for 20 years. I'm a single mother, family of 5, taking care of my 3 children and elderly mom. I have no job, I have no skills. I'm just getting by surviving through Airbnb. This is the only means I have preventing my family from living on the streets and pitching a tent on your sidewalks. I'm barely just getting by. My whole livelihood depends on hosting 2 rooms year-round. This ordinance prevents me from booking these 2 rooms at the same time. For example, when a couple stays in one room, I cannot have guests in another. Let me repeat. When a couple stays in one room, I can't have guests in the other. It slashes more than half of my income and would devastate my family financially. I am begging you, remove this restriction before enforcement and allow me to have 2 groups of guests in my home at a time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a senior, and by no choice of my own, my business has diminished substantially over the last few years, causing a loss of income and turning to my home to supplement my Social Security. I depend on the income from home sharing to make ends meet. Even that income is not that much. This $850 fee to extend my ability to rent is excessive and places an additional burden on me as well as other hosts I know. I believe it should be eliminated, or at least some accommodation made for low-income people for whom the $850 fee is a hardship. Each host in home sharing is a portal through which income in the form of occupancy tax flows into the city of Los Angeles. Please consider the hosts on my end of the spectrum.
Thank you. But tell us your name. Pardon me, sir. Sir, can you tell us your name?
I'm Steve Hirsch in
Thank
the
you.
Eagle Rock.
Thank you.
Ed Coleman. I'm retired and share a guest room in my home of 35 years. I depend on that income to pay my mortgage and health insurance. I'm a responsible host. I registered and obtained my permit. I'll register for extended home sharing as I need to pay my mortgage year-round. However, this law makes it difficult and expensive to comply. Registration for extended home sharing was supposed to be easy, as directed by the City Council, but it's far from easy. I have to dig through city records to discover who owns the homes around me and whether or not they have tenants who also need to be notified. I have to figure out how to format and print the mailing labels and drive them to BTC and Van Nuys. Why can't we do all this online as promised? What about the exorbitant $850 fee that was supposed to be fair and reasonable? And the per night surcharge that no one has been talking about? How much is that going to cost us? Nobody knows. You need to keep your promise to the people who elected you and simplify this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Cole, Peggy Sturdivant, Leslie Hope, Alice Walker. Yes. All right, I'll read it again. You should go on. Yes, please start talking. Your time is going.
Okay, Leslie Hope. This extended home sharing ordinance is anything but simple. In fact, it seems designed solely for deep-pocketed individuals and companies who can afford to hire consultants to navigate the city's land use processes. For example, after formatting my own mailing labels, which is a process I'm not personally familiar with, I will have to travel to downtown or Van Nuys to pay Better Technology Corporation. Such a trip would be an unnecessary hardship and a deterrent to registration. Many home sharing hosts are seniors or disabled. Rather than better technology that we should be able to complete online, what we have is antiquated technology. In June, one of the city planners said that BTC would do the hard work for hosts when it comes to extended home sharing. Why are we talking about the extended home sharing process now instead of back in June? By rushing this ordinance through without sufficient attention to the nuts and bolts.
That's your time. Thank you.
Fiasco.
Hi, my name is Alice Walker. Mom and pop home sharers like myself have been able to expand on our lives and goals in exponentially positive ways. I have a guest house in Van Nuys and 2 extra rooms in my house that I rent out on Airbnb. I live on the property full time. This income has allowed me to start a theater company which now employs about 100 artists and craftsmen in Los Angeles. I also co-host and manage other properties for several other homeowners who've been able to keep their homes and pay for important health-related matters because of their ability to home share year-round. Limiting the amount of days we can host, or worse, the amount of spaces we can host in our home at a time, is effectively making it impossible for me and the other homeowners I represent to continue to afford these positive goals. While we can absolutely register for a permit, we kindly ask that the process is simple, straightforward, and more affordable. I can go on and on about the wonderful qualities about home sharing, the other ways in which me and these other homeowners have been positively affected, but I will not, because my time is out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, we have Peggy Sturdivant. All right. David Ewing, Brian Averill, Gloria Colazzo. Wade Trimmer, Carlos Aguilar, Gina Charusumbat. If you're, come on up. If you're there, please come forward and start speaking. You can come in any order. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gloria Colazzo. I'm with El Salvador Ecuadorian Chamber of Commerce. In addition to that, I'm the Vice Chairman for St. Jude Board of Directors in Orange County. With families being evicted out of our homes and thousands of people living on the streets, it is inconceivable why the City Council considered delaying the enforcement at this point. I don't understand. I live with these people every day. I help these people. From my heart, I tell you, this is something that has been happening for a long time. I don't know why it's waiting so long. Approval of appendix and the platform agreement immediately. This is something you cannot think about it anymore. Mr. Cedillo. In addition to this ordinance also protects RSO units. This council must continue to protect RSO units and not open it to a loophole to allow for RSOs to be taken off the market to host tourists. We had waited a long time for these rules to be enforced. Today is the time for action. Let's approve Appendix A, begin enforcement, and start working together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Wade Trimmer, the Executive Director of the Housing and Homeless Services for the National Health Foundation. My message to you is simple. Homelessness in Los Angeles will not be slowed without first stabilizing the rental market. There is an absolute correlation between rising rents and homelessness, and it's a major reason why so many individuals and families are on the streets. It can't be ignored that the unregulated and unenforced short-term rental industry has contributed to home values and rental rate increases. Homelessness is a complex issue that our city is trying to fight on many fronts, and this cannot be overlooked. It's time to put more units back on the market. I urge you to approve Appendix A today and enforce on November 1st. Thank you.
Carlos Aguilar, Coalition for Economic Survival. The home sharing ordinance has taken over 3 years to get implementation, but now as we get closer to start date, those who seek to further undermine the efforts and place holes to undermine its intent. Remember, the intent of the ordinance is to prevent displacement of hard-working residents in good standing. Earlier today, the council voted to protect tenants from unscrupulous evictions. You cannot now, just a few hours later, defend the obstruction and dilution of an ordinance that will serve to protect those the city claimed it was helping from ending up homeless. Home sharing platforms need to provide data as required. They had almost a year to prepare. The data is necessary for enforcement to ensure that they are not circumventing any rules established. We need compliance now, we need the data now, we need enforcement now.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is David Ewing. I've been living in Venice for over 40 years. This ordinance was first proposed 4 years ago, and since then I've watched my neighborhood lose over 2,000 entire homes to short-term rentals. Thousands of people pushed out, some of them onto the street. And that's just Venice. Then last year, after endless back and forth, this ordinance was finally adopted. Platforms and hosts had a seat at the table, knew what was going to be required, and had 11 months to prepare and comply. And now the dog ate their homework? Please, a $38 billion tech company can't come up with a simple spreadsheet in 11 months? Really, are you kidding? Our housing market is in shambles. Homelessness impacts every corner, every person, everywhere in the city. And Airbnb is playing for your sympathy?
Thank you.
That's chutzpah.
That's your time.
Please.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Averill. I'm a member of...
One more time.
Brian Averill.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm a member of the Venice Neighborhood Council, though today I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbors at the Ellison.
The Ellison is the largest RSO building in Venice. What was once a thriving community of about 90 people babysat for each other. We walked each other's dogs. We took packages. The definition of a community has now been bullied down to 9 people, sort of hanging on for dear life. This is not just happening in the Ellison. This is happening all over Venice and all over Los Angeles. We, in Venice especially, are very clearly drowning in an affordable housing crisis and a homelessness epidemic. And to not put these units back on the market as soon as possible, I think is a gigantic mistake. Please get this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Lux, Dion Ware, Susan Hunter, Pastor Eddie Jones.
My name is Linda Lux. I moved to Venice in 1970, and I have seen so many changes. What I can't understand is how you would want to postpone this ordinance that you voted in. We have been so inundated. You've heard other speakers about Venice. I've seen it all happen. I work for Venice Community Housing, and I'm speaking on behalf of them, and I can tell you that every day, all staff gets calls from Venice residents who are being pushed out of their homes to turn them into short-term rentals. We can't build fast enough to meet the need, as you know. Venice has a lot of people who have been pushed out. We are trying very hard to build hundreds of new units of affordable housing for people, and we've also opened transitional housing for transition-age youth. But this is ridiculous. 11 months for a big company not to be ready to go on November 1. So perfection is the enemy of the good. Let's get this going and put rental units back on the market where they belong and need to be. Thank you so much.
Susan Hunter, Los Angeles Tenantine, Hollywood local caseworker. And firstly, I want to give a shout out to Matthew Glesney and the planning department for being in the crosshairs of all this chaos and trying to get people to obey the law as we're writing the law. And I'm sure it has not been easy. I just want to say that as a corporation, Airbnb right now, currently, are not being a good actor. The city has made a simple request. Confirm with us who your good apples are, because it's about time that the good apples in this room be allowed to operate within the law. And right now, the good apples are being held up by Airbnb, who are acting to protect the bad apples. I think that's across the board. All we need to be able to do is simply identify the good apples from the bad apples, and let's get the show on the road. How can we enforce if we don't know who's doing what? It's a very simple ask, and I hope the people today who are here in the blue shirts, who are the good apples, are putting as much pressure on Airbnb to do the right thing and share their data as they are, and asking you to streamline their process. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. Deron Ware, South Central Los Angeles. I'm in support of Appendix A because the homeless problem is a crisis down here, and we need a lot of more vacancy, and passing Appendix A will create some type of percentage of availability to help our homeless problem. My mother works hard for the County of Los Angeles, and for a decade, she has not been able to find affordable housing. She still lives with my grandmother, and that's the real definition of home share. People over profit.
Good afternoon to this very distinguished board. I'm Pastor Eddie Jones, president of the Los Angeles Civil Rights Association. A lot of people's civil, constitutional, and human rights are being violated. Pass Appendix A. The homeless situation will come back and bite this city of Los Angeles. You need to do your job, analyze and evaluate not your dollars, but the people's dollars here on the streets who are working hard to try to find a place to live. I don't want to see any more homeless people than we have to. What we need to do is pass Appendix A and make the situation go away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That exhausts our 20 minutes, 10 minutes on for and against on this item. So I'll open it up to the members for questions, comments, and discussion, beginning with Mr. Blumenfeld.
Great. Yeah, I think we're overdue. We need to pass Appendix A. We need to move forward. We, as a council, unanimously adopted this ordinance over a year ago. We want to bring short-term rentals. It was illegal in this city. We made it legal, and we made it legal because we were going to enforce it and separate the good from the bad and do it in the right way. We have a plan to move forward. There's no reason not to move forward. So I just want to ask a couple of questions. In terms of the master platform agreements, will any of them be in place by November 1st?
Arthi Varma with the Planning Department. As I mentioned, we've been having ongoing discussions with several of the hosting platforms, including Airbnb, Expedia, and Mr. B&B. We've been having productive dialogue. We are hopeful that we will get to a point to have a master platform agreement prior to November 1st.
Much more likely, assuming we're sticking to our deadline, that there'll be a strong incentive. It's one of those things, you know, that if you create the deadline 6 months from now, then that's how long it's going to take. We've had 6 months to do it. I don't think there's any reason why they can't get the platform agreement, but even if it isn't quite done by the November 1st, are there alternative ways to enforce?
Tricia Keene, City Planning Department. Yes, the ordinance provides, the ordinance itself is something that everyone has to comply with, and Appendix A provides some specific examples or alternatives to comply with the ordinance. So with the adoption of Appendix A, we will have the provisions of the ordinance plus some additional alternatives to begin enforcement on November 1st.
Right. And will there be a prioritization in terms of enforcement, in terms of who or where, what gets enforced on first?
Arthi Varma, we're ready to begin enforcement on November 1st of the entire ordinance. You know, as with any enforcement, there may be certain areas where implementation is easier, but we are ready to begin enforcement sort of across the board, all of the aspects of the ordinance.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, please don't disrupt this meeting.
So one of the things, if you own a home and you have a granny flat, secondary unit in-house, both your properties are considered RSO, correct? Because now it's looked at as like a duplex?
The RSO only applies to 2 units or more. If an ADU is built on a single-family property where the primary structure was built prior to 1978, it is possible that the existing single-family home could be considered under the RSO ordinance if the property is considered to be multifamily, 2 units or more.
So if I have a secondary unit and I live in the house, I'm considered an RSO and I cannot Airbnb?
The existing ordinance does prohibit home sharing in the RSO unit. So if the primary residence is considered an RSO, then that would be prohibited.
Doesn't that? Yeah.
Mr. Lee?
So, yeah, so I just don't understand like how, if that's my house, it's my primary residence, I have a secondary unit, I'm renting out to a long-term renter, and I want to do it. I don't. Is there a reason for that?
Arthi Varma, we are having discussions with the housing department on the enforcement of the rent stabilization ordinance as it relates to that particular issue.
Okay, because the complaints I'm getting are people just trying to go, they're trying to comply, and they try to go online, and they're automatically being kicked off because they're not qualifying under the RSO. That's something that's going to be addressed. And the second thing is with the granny flats, I know that they were talking about is there an exemption as far as prior to 2017 you can use it?
Yes, accessory dwelling units that are built prior to January 1st, 2017 are permitted to be utilized for home sharing.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments, Mr. Cedillo? We'll hold for you for a second. You're good on this one? Okay. All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll move that we approve the resolution contained in the October 18, 2019 Planning Department report to adopt Appendix A of the Home Sharing Administrative Guidelines, which includes the hosting platform responsibilities. We will ask for a report back on the 29th of October for the master platform agreements. So that's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Blumenfeld. Any objection? Hearing none, that'll be the order. All right, so that disposes of item number 10. Can we move to item number 1, Mr. Mejia?
Item 1, Councilman, is Mr. Bertoni's weekly report.
I do not have a weekly report this week, but I'll happy to do it next week. Thank you.
All right. Can we then move Mr. Mejia to item number 11?
Yes. Item 11, Councilman, this is a motion of Farrell Wesson. It's instructing city planning and city attorney to come back with recommendations for a pilot program in CD 13 that would allow primary residents that are subject to RSO to participate in home sharing.
All right, we have a staff report from the Department of City Planning on this.
I don't think so, Councilman. This is just a motion that needs to be adopted.
Okay. Mr. Blumenfeld?
Yeah, when we last heard this item, we discussed a narrow exemption for one owner-occupied unit in a small RSO like a fourplex or duplex. And I remember I talked to Mr. O'Farrell about that when he brought that up, because I can't support opening up RSOs in general, but I understand if it's owner-occupied, it's not. If it's owner-occupied, the unit that you live in, as far as I'm concerned, you're not actually. It's not a rent-controlled unit. It is the unit that you own. So, and that was the exemption that we talked with Mr. O'Farrell about, which is what I'd like to see. I can't support what's written in front of us, which is a carve-out for one district. I don't think that's an appropriate policy method. But if it were limited, and I'm prepared to amend it, if it were limited to the entire city, but to the actual unit that the owner occupies, not the other units, not the unit that is a rent-controlled unit where you actually have a renter in it, but to the unit that is owned, then I'm okay with that. And I think that would solve the problem Mr. Lee is talking about as well. I guess so. Then I'm going to move that we amend it as such. Amend it to basically apply not to one district but to the entire city, and amend it to only impact the owner-occupied unit itself, not the other units that owner may be renting to. So if you have a fourplex, you live in a unit, you have an extra bedroom, you should be able to rent it. But if you're renting to someone through rent control, all of the issues with the shenanigans that can happen with landlords and apply, so we wouldn't deal with that, or we'll deal with that issue at another time. But so that's my proposal for amending this motion.
I'll second your amendment, and then I'll ask the guidance of the city attorney. So we have before us another item which does something similar to what this item, if amended, would do.
Yes, I think you're speaking to motion under item number 12.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Item 12 goes a lot further, though, in my view. So I couldn't support item 12 the way I understand it, but I could support the item 11 the way it's amended.
All right. So we've got a motion and a second on Mr. Blumenfield's amendment. Is there any discussion? Mr. Lee?
On item 11?
Yes. Mr. Cedillo.
I'm just not sure what it does. I mean, by definition, if you own it, then you're not in the RSO.
Unfortunately, that's not the way that it's defined. That's why it's needed, because technically speaking, even though you own it, it's an RSO building, and the way that the law was written, it's applying to you. I think we're all agreeing in concept that it shouldn't apply to you because you own that unit. But we need to be explicit about that to make that clear. So this would, if you believe that that's the case, that's okay. This is just then a clarification.
Council, I may be mistaken on the RSOs, but the RSOs seem to me to be questions of, by definition, rent stabilization ordinance. If you own your home, you're not a renter. Therefore, by definition, you're not in the rent stabilization ordinance.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. depending on the action here, we can come back and address all of those questions and clear that up.
I just think that fundamentally this is not the intent or the purpose. I support the broader general ordinance and I support the implementation. But the fact of the matter is that this is a discussion of people who have extraordinary circumstances. And we may say technically home ownership doesn't matter, but in fact it does. I mean, as I said, this is with respect to the rent stabilization ordinance. This is about renters and the abuse of that, as some would argue, in terms of larger multi-family units. But I don't think this is about people taking care of their parents who are stressed. I mean, the fact of the matter is boomers are aging out of the workforce. Their parents are coming home. Their millennial children in many instances don't leave, or when they do leave, they provide opportunities for them to have income to take care of their parents or aged, infirmed family members. That's just the reality. That's just the reality of America today. And so we know that. We know that in California. We just look at the demographics. We can look at the age of the population, and all families, many families in this nation, the state, the city are challenged by that. So it's very true. It's a truism. One size does not fit all. So we need to acknowledge that. Mr. Lee has brought up a particular point that I think is on point. And I think we have to look at the differences of home ownership, or people who own duplexes, or triplexes, or fourplexes. And I think those are completely, fundamentally different than a multi-unit place in Venice, or in Hollywood, or in Denver. So this is not what the hotels are concerned about. This is not where people are losing, and hotels are losing occupants because somebody in Highland Park or in Lincoln Heights or in Boyle Heights is struggling because of what's taking place and is taking advantage of changes in their family to rent a bedroom or two. And so I've proposed the item number 12, the amendment. I think it's carved out. I think it's a... You're going to tell me I can't talk about it right now?
Yes, you're doing item 11.
Item number 11.
Actually, I think I can talk about it if I do a compare-contrast. And so in comparison, as I talk about item number 11 and why 11 is inadequate and 12 is more appropriate, is simply because it's a very narrowly carved out niche, it's a very specific population, and it's very exact to the type of crisis taking place in our city. If we want to move forward with this ordinance to protect housing and to make sure we don't exacerbate homelessness, then we must carve out these smaller homeowners, because what we do is jeopardize their status. Please. Because as property owners, we're jeopardizing their circumstance. We are placing them in peril. When they own a duplex and rely on the second unit, the economics of it, sometimes that's not sufficient. And to deny them this as homeowners then is contrary to what our goal is. If our goal is the broad policy to make sure we don't exacerbate homelessness and stabilize vacancies, we are not going in that direction when we fail to recognize the circumstances of home ownership and the circumstances of those who own, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. And so for that reason, I would suggest that 12 is the more appropriate response in this circumstance.
I thank you, Mr. Cedillo. We'll hear again from Mr. Blumenfeld on this matter, but I would note that in a compare and contrast to between items number 11 and number 12, I have an amendment in front of me that says something different than what you just said, Mr. Cedillo, that it covers bullet number 2. The first one, it says, for a unit which serves as a renter's primary residence, not an owner's primary residence. So that's a big distinction from what you just laid out. Because I think there's general agreement about owners.
You're right, but you have to understand that's within the duplex or the triplex. In other words, we're saying to the person who owns the duplex that their tenant may engage in this activity so that it stabilizes that tenancy. Remember, this is within the RSO. It maintains all the restrictions that we have, and it does not place them in peril because they exist within the protections of the RSO. That's what the language of this proposal says.
Mr. Blumenfeld.
Yeah, I mean, I have great respect for Mr. Cedillo. We agree on most things, but we have a disagreement here in the sense that I understand you're looking at it from one perspective, but I also think we need to look at it from the perspective of those renters who are in that fourplex or triplex or duplex, because they, if Airbnb or any sort of short-term rental is allowed in all of the units, not just the owner-occupied unit, then there's an incentive to do all sorts of things that will ultimately result in that renter being, when it gets turned over, it changes, or that pressure on that renter to do the short-term rental because they're already paying below market rate. And the landlord has all this incentive to try to figure out side agreements to get them to rent it. So instead of renting to a 3-bedroom unit to a family of 4 or 5, they're going to rent it to a one person so that they can Airbnb those other 3 units, make more money for themselves, and share that with the landlord. We've seen it happen before. We know it puts those people in peril. I don't want to relitigate this thing. We had a whole discussion about it a year ago. You're talking about a massive change to what we decided on a year ago. It's one thing dealing with the owner-occupied because I think that was an oversight, but this is opening up Pandora's box and potentially losing a lot of units of housing, and I think hurting very vulnerable people. And I know that's not your intention. We both care deeply about doing what's best for our most vulnerable, but we have a difference of opinion in terms of the consequence of this kind of action. I fear and I think that the consequence of opening up the RSOs is going to be that those vulnerable folks are going to get hurt and that we are going to lose housing stock.
All right. So we've been back and forth on this. Folks, you gotta let us have this discussion. So we've been back and forth on this a couple times. We've got about 50 people on the queue to speak on item number 11. And I would like for us to consider item number 11 and 12 together, since we've been discussing them together. So I'd ask you, Mr. Mejia, to read item number 12 into the record. Sure. I've got literally 50 speakers between those two items.
So item 12, Councilman, is Mr. Cedillo's motion. It's instructing city plannings and staff, city attorney, and CAO-CLA to come back with environmental clearances that would allow home sharing in multifamily RSO units with 4 or fewer units.
All right, so we're gonna we'll do 20 minutes on each side of this issue, and we've got a number of speakers, so please come right up and start speaking as quickly as you can. We can get through this. Susan Hunter, Linda Lux, Luis Cabrales, Carlos Aguilar. If you've already spoken, you don't have to speak again. Yelena Zeltzer, Julio Lopez, Danielle Wilson, Kate Spear.
Susan Hunter, Los Angeles Tenants Union, Hollywood local caseworker. I just want to say 2 points. One, it's concerning to pass either of these or even ask for a report back without including some kind of protection to say that anybody who would now do a owner-occupied move-in or a family member move-in from this point forward should not be allowed to do home sharing, because obviously you were not intending to do it prior to this ordinance being considered. So we have to put in some protections for the tenants. I think we can actually find some middle ground on that by saying anybody who's currently doing it, that should be considered. But if we're going to open it up and allow people to abuse it, we have to stop that abuse before it happens. Otherwise, it puts a lot of work on us. We come back here and bug you, and you hate that. The other thing that we want to consider, we do have to be very careful when we're talking about defining RSO and who RSO protects. If we're going to allow the rules to be bent to create more housing, we can't use that housing for a commercial purpose. Otherwise, we just undermine the intent to begin with. Thank you for your time.
Again, my name is Linda Lux. I'm with Venice Community Housing. And Mr. Cedillo, in CD 13 has some of the highest homeless numbers within its borders. So it's unbelievable that you would even consider an RSO carve-out. Mr. Cedillo, I was talking to you. Hi. Okay, could you listen? I would appreciate it. The more exceptions that you add to the ordinance, the more you weaken it. And the more opportunity you give to profiteers to make a quick buck at the expense of needy families. This motion hasn't even been heard by the full council. Procedurally, this needs to be considered by the full body before this committee takes any action and gives any instruction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carlos Aguilar, Coalition for Economic Survival. We do not support any carve-outs or carve-out experiments to know that there will be displacement under this proposal. We cannot undermine an ordinance that has not even been put into effect. Please understand that. If allowed, more districts can then file for exemptions, and then where does it end? We will be back at square one asking City Council to stop displacement that has led to even more homelessness yet again. Please do not support these items that do special carve-outs. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Kate Spear, and I'm a resident of Council District 1 and a researcher with Unite Here Local 11. It is no surprise that we are in a housing crisis here in Los Angeles, and District 1 is absolutely no exception. I recently was forced to move from my rental unit in District 1 and faced significant obstacles trying to find affordable housing in the same neighborhood. After months of searching, I eventually had to settle for a unit that was far more than what I was paying previously, and I'm now facing a new set of very significant financial concerns. We must ensure that rent-stabilized housing remains available for what it is intended for, long-term housing. Our members are even more acutely impacted by this crisis, and many are being displaced, having to live further and further away from where they work. We cannot afford to lose any more units of housing, especially our rent-stabilized housing. It is particularly valuable to our membership, especially in Council District 1. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Wilson. I live at 20336 Via Urbino in Porter Ranch, which is Councilman Lee's district. I grew up in this district and have struggled for years to find housing close to where I work downtown with the Hotel Workers Union. I used to live in the city of West Hollywood, where there is a straight ban on short-term rentals, which has been very, very successful. And now I find myself, after years of trying to find housing in this city as a young professional, trying to live a normal life in the city I grew up in, practically forced to live at home with my family extremely far from my workplace. The decrease in my quality of life is directly connected to my housing insecurity, which is a direct result of our unprecedented housing crisis. We should in no way be weakening our own city's law by allowing short-term rentals in rent-stabilized units. We need protections of our housing now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Yelena Zeltzer. I'm here with Unite Here Local 11. I rent in a quadruplex that is rent stabilized. My landlord derives an income from my rent that is rent stabilized. So they already derive an income from the rent of that unit. Should they choose to take that unit off and rent it through short-term rentals, I will be displaced. I'm a single parent. I think every single day about what I could do if I was to be displaced from my rent stabilized unit where I've lived for 10 years. I could not afford my rent where I live at the level that I pay it. We are talking about our members, our service workers, our working people of Los Angeles. We do not have homes to leverage. We do not have homes to rent out on short-term rentals. So I invite you guys to think about what this ordinance was intended to protect renters, and carve-outs and loopholes that come into effect even before the ordinance takes place undermines all of that.
Esteban Topete. Wayne from Encino.
Hello, y'all. My name is Esteban Topete, and I'm here to urge y'all to not to touch any RSO units. As a volunteer with SAGE, in their Tenant Action Clinic, we see a lot of community members not being able to find housing. And I was here this morning when y'all passed the vote to protect tenants. We need to keep our affordable housing as affordable housing. When you allow short-term rentals in RSO units, a family cannot find a house. Thank you.
Welcome back, Mr. Bloodsucker. So today, you're going against the Cedillo. I'm here to tell you, you're going to lose, blah, bleeb, and bleed. You're going to lose to the Cedillo. And John Lee's going to lose to the Cedillo. And Marquisi, he don't know how to deal with a Cedillo. How do you deal with a Cedillo? You take it up the ass like Garcetti. That's what you do with that. Gil Cedillo been around
Stay
long
on the topic,
time.
Mr. Spindler.
He's been around forever. Gil Cedillo knows
We're
about
on
rental
items number
housing.
11 and 12.
So, now one item. Now, the facts are this. In the first district, we have a crisis. Gil Cedillo has the right motion. Pass that motherfucking motion. Tell that goddamn Bob Blumenfield to get the fuck back to Tarzana and clean up that fucking homeless encampment of 7-Eleven.
All right, Simone Wallace, Mark Bachner, Cheryl Bremer, Claire Date, Heather Carson, Melinda Ajatep, Clara.
Good afternoon. My name is Simone Wallace. I've lived on my property on Preston Way in East Venice since 1978, and I'm here to ask you to support the RSO exemption for homeowners. I'm a retired senior living on a small Social Security. In my past career, I owned an independent community bookstore for nearly 30 years. I taught at LAUSD. And I've always supported union workers. I support renters' rights. I support affordable housing in Los Angeles. However, although this ordinance means to protect housing in Los Angeles, it hurts low-income residents like myself who may be forced to sell and have our homes turned into more treeless McMansions. I discovered that my home is on the RSO register because we have two houses on the property. Both of the houses are owner-occupied. I have a room in my home which I rent out, and I am on the premises. Please make a distinction between the large absentee owners and people like myself. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Bremer, and I'm an Airbnb host in Brentwood.
Can you speak into the mic and tell us your name again?
Sorry. My name is Cheryl Bremer, and I'm an Airbnb host in Brentwood. In 2016, my husband was laid off, and I started sharing our guest room in our two-bedroom condo. My husband and I occupy one bedroom and use the spare one for Airbnb. We bought our condo in 2001 because it was the least expensive two-bedroom property in Brentwood. Our building was built in 1969, and which made it affordable for us. Up until a few months ago, I had no idea that our building was subject to RSO. It's galling to me that the newer multi-million-dollar condos across the street can host Airbnb guests, but I cannot. Without Airbnb, we would have been in danger of losing our home when my husband was laid off. Applying the RSO policy to units like mine unreasonably singles out people who live in older, more affordable homes while favoring wealthy homeowners. 2 years ago, I attended the South Brentwood Homeowners Association and met with Bonin. He confirmed that I was a good player and told me the new regulations would not affect me. He was wrong.
Hello, my name's Claire Date. I recently went to register for home sharing,
And I too found out that I live in an RSO building. I had absolutely no idea. I own my condo, and it is my primary residence, and it's all I have in the world. I went through a very nasty divorce 6 years ago. I lost nearly everything I had. I fought hard and long for my house. It's my sanctuary. Being able to home share has been an absolute lifesaver for me. It's been my only income. I have nothing else, no 401k, no savings. My ex-husband took all those things. All I have is my home, and now I find myself in a situation where I may be forced to sell, or worse, face foreclosure. I am not impacting the homelessness in Los Angeles. I am not a threat to the hotel industry. I am just an average citizen of Los Angeles trying to live a simple life. Please allow home sharing for people like me. Do not take this away from me.
My name is Melinda Agatep. I have been retired for 5 years now. I worked as a union member, special education LAUSD teacher. I worked with children with autism and emotionally disturbed disabilities. I retired early so I could take care of my 94-year-old mother who lives with us. I also take care of my 24-year-old granddaughter and her 4 daughters, ages 6, 4, 3, and 10 months, who also live with us. We're truly a multi-generational family under one roof. Without helping these family members, they would have nowhere to go. Renting our back house has allowed me to retire early so I can care for my family financially and physically. My mother used to live in the back house until she wasn't able to care for herself, and she moved in with us. We never rented to any long-term tenants. Unfortunately, we are considered RSO, and under the current ordinance, we are prevented from sharing our additional unit. Therefore, I would like to ask you to please support Councilmember Cedillo's motion to allow hosts with RSO units to continue to share their homes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Bachner. I am an RSO host who is at risk of losing my triplex if I lose my home sharing income. In 2008, I lost almost everything, and I've struggled to hold on to my property since. I rent a room in my apartment, my own apartment, which is listed on the platform as a whole house because it has its own entrance and shares no common areas with me. It functions perfectly for short-term stays, but without a kitchen, it would not be appropriate for long-term tenancy. We all want to protect affordable housing and to prevent abuses like at the Ellison, but this ordinance as written currently victimizes mom and pop hosts who are trying to make ends meet, which is why my councilman, Mitch O'Farrell, has put forth this motion. By allowing for owner-occupied hosting in RSO units, you are protecting us, the most vulnerable hosts, while also protecting the housing stock. I personally can't lose my triplex. It is the only way I can afford to retire when that time comes.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heather Carson. I'm co-chair of the Home Share Alliance Los Angeles, representing thousands of hosts. I'm confused as to why you didn't hear this motion first before hearing the matter of implementation. Are you seriously going to consider throwing 13,000 mom and pop hosts into housing and financial insecurity, and then what? In a few months allow them back in? After they're behind on their mortgage? You need to delay on mom and pop hosts and start enforcement on commercial operators. Indicated that the outreach phase would take place during the first 60 days commencing July 1, but in fact, planning is only now 4 months later doing outreach. As Tricia just mentioned, only 2 have been held in the last week. In September, senior planner Bob Duenas said bookings made prior to November 1 would be grandfathered in. Last week, Glesney said that could have been addressed with a more nuanced platform agreement. We are getting caught as collateral damage between these 2 entities. Please reconsider the motion to implement.
Mickey Jackson. Mickey Jackson going once. There she is. After that, we'll have Andrew Ward and Corey Schmidt.
Okay, thank you. I really wanted to echo a lot of what Susan Hunter had said originally. which is that the people who are obeying the rules, the mom and pops, the small, we're helping keep them from being homeless when we allow and we carve out for them. The real violators are the big corporate, imagine that. Again, the violators are the big corporate landlords. They violate everything, and they violate all of these regulations along with it. But please, let's not take hostages.
Andrew Ward, Corey Schmidt. Come on, Mr. Schmidt, we got to go.
Corey Schmidt for the record. Just give my 2 cents a little bit. The whole home sharing thing to me is I see that there's a lot of people that use it as income, and I also used to do it as well. So I kind of understand where everybody's coming from. So I feel like people should be allowed to rent out their places if they want to, but I think that there's greedy people, which I've also come into contact with, that kind of want to just, to give a key phrase, this guy wanted to do a whole bunch of Airbnbs, and I was like, well, there's not a whole lot of profit from it, and what about the neighbors and everything? And the key phrase that he said was, fuck the neighbors. And I was like, really? That's how you feel about it? Because I understand letting people grow their income a little bit, or making things happen if they fall down, but I also don't think that we should be saying fuck the neighbors, because it's like we all got to work together. You know what I mean? This is a community. So that's my thoughts on everything.
Thank you so much, Mark Diaz, Kendall Mayhew.
Hi, Mark Diaz. I just think the blanket inclusion of all RSOs is hurting the very people that you're supposed to be protecting. My girlfriend is a single mother who finally was able to buy, and she found a little set of 4-unit bungalows with a couple of vacancies in this RSO building, with 2 units very under market, $700 for an elderly woman, $1,200 for a couple in their 50s. With her living in one of them, she left 1 vacant to rent, which she was able to make the mortgage work because she could Airbnb the 4th. All right? But so it lets the tenants live there with no weird pressure of threat of evictions that so many people worry about. But she'll have to move out or sell the place because of this ordinance. The RSO is already there in place. It's protecting the people that it's supposed to enforce the RSO properly, and you don't have to throw all these other things under the, that's where I totally disagree with you. It's like the RSO is already there. Enforce that properly instead of having to add some more things to the RSO. They're already protected. If you're a shady landlord trying to evict somebody under the RSO, enforce that so they can't be evicted, whether it's for Airbnb or for other purposes.
Hi, my name is Kendall Mayhew. I work as a housing organizer and I work with folks who live in RSO units protecting tenants from evictions. I also myself was evicted 2 years ago. The unit that I used to live in is now a full-time Airbnb in Silver Lake. And while I understand that there are a lot of people in this room who are good actors, my landlord was also in this room with a blue shirt on. And it turned out that the unit that we were living in was illegal the entire time. So these bad actors exist, and if we don't have enforcement mechanisms, we are going to be in huge trouble. We are already seeing people get evicted at rates that we cannot keep up with. So we have to protect these RSO units. It's super important that we have enforcement mechanisms, and if we aren't talking about that, we really have to make adjustments to this amendment. And again, I want these folks in the room to be holding Airbnb accountable as well. They have not been complying with this the way that they could be. They're a company that's larger than Marriott and Hilton combined. Let's hold them to account, okay? Please.
Thank you so much. So that concludes our time for public comment on this. We've got 2 items before us. One, yes, Council Office, Council District 13.
Good afternoon, council members. Christine Peters, council member Mitch O'Farrell's office. I just wanted to make a few clarifications of the council member's position on items 11 and 12, since they're both coupled together for discussion right now. On June 18th, when the council member was here and spoke elaborately on why he was concerned about the rent stabilization ordinance owner-occupied units. So as Mr. Blumenfeld articulated earlier, he felt on that day that he had amended his motion to apply to owner-occupied units that would be applicable to all of the same rules and regulations that apply to anybody else who is able to apply for the home sharing ordinance. So for number 11, we do feel that that is the best way for the city to move forward because it covers most broadly how it would impact owner-occupied units. By starting to codify and call out 4-unit or less buildings, 6 units or less, you're then immediately going to impact people who own condominiums, who are owner-occupied. One of the folks who spoke earlier lives in a condo development that has 18 units. She's the owner of her unit. She wants to be able to participate in home sharing for the same amount of time that somebody who lives in a single-family house does. So our office does feel that it is cleaner for the city to move forward if they want to for citywide policy with item 11 amended as Mr. Blumenfeld suggested. We do have serious concerns about starting to restrict numbers of units and buildings. The council member is concerned about essentially codifying de facto hotels by calling out units that can be in a building of 4 units or smaller. So it really should be restricted to homeownership. People who own their units, it's their primary residence. They have to prove it as well as anybody else who's registering. Right now, we have constituents who are trying to register their primary residences, who are going online, who live in single-family residences, but according to ZEMAS, they're also under rent stabilization, and they're being kicked out of the system. So we do think that we need to resolve this issue as soon as possible so that the good players, the good mom-and-pop operators, aren't put in jeopardy of losing their homes because they did do their due diligence when they bought their homes, that they were going to be able to share them, but also have flexibility and be able to have family come and visit, or when they have children away at college, that they can rent those rooms out when they're away, but then they're available to them when they come back. So we thank you very much. If you could move item 11 forward as amended by Mr. Blumenfeld. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That concludes public comment. So we've got before us, Mr. Mejia, item number 11. We have a amendment made and seconded.
Yes.
So we'll discuss that first.
Yes, those are the
before we
two
go to the item.
amendments by Mr. Blumenfield to apply it citywide and for only to apply to owner-occupied units, not to the renters.
Yeah, excellent. Mr. Blumenfield, any further discussion? All right. So that amendment is up for consideration if there's no further discussion. All those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Those who oppose? Hearing no opposition, that amendment carries. And so now we have item number 11 before us.
No, now we go to item 12, Councilman.
But
We acted on 11 right now.
We just did I thought we just voted on the amendment.
Yes, yes, correct. For item 11.
Right, so we accepted the amendment. Now don't we have to accept the whole thing?
Yes.
All right, so item number 11 as amended. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. So we've taken care of number 11. Now we're on number 12.
Yes, Councilman. So now item 12 is Mr. Cedillo's motion for the requesting environmental clearances that would allow home sharing in multifamily RSO units with 4 or fewer units.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Cedillo.
Can I speak to my...
Yes, sir. Discussion.
Thank you. Let me make clear what we're doing here and what we're not. We are not compromising not one iota, nor is there any evidence, not one scintilla of evidence, that we're compromising any RSO units. So that this proposal here applies to owner-occupied buildings, someone who may own a duplex or a triplex, or in the extreme, a fourplex, that this person is allowed to engage in home sharing activity, and that their tenants are also with the full protection, and I've spoken to our council and made sure that the sub point of this says that all of this is subject to the RSO, to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, that those living within these very narrowly carved out, not the broader challenges that this policy was meant to address, that this is here to protect tenants and not hotels, that we are here to protect tenants and protect those owner-occupied buildings that are 4 units or smaller, that recognizing the circumstances that have been articulated here today, that not one size fits all, but that this is a city that has 138,000 units under RSO protection, but that there is a smaller amount, there's a smaller community of people who have become homeowners or own duplexes for which that is their primary residence, and that community of people, that smaller community of people that you see here today, who have made these investments in our city, who are here challenged by the changing demographics of our life in America, that they are exempted only for the home sharing activity. They're not exempted from the rules of home sharing, nor are they exempted from the rules of RSO. And that in this small circumstance, that these people, their circumstances need to be acknowledged, need to be recognized, and that we should carve out this small exemption for them so that we have a bill that doesn't exacerbate. Because people come here from Boyle Heights or Lincoln Heights or the Valley who have bought a duplex. And they bought a duplex maybe 20 years ago. Actually, they bought the duplex further because it's RSO protected. So they have had this duplex that fell within the protections of the RSO, and now the circumstances have changed. I mean, this is the reality. This is why we do these interim control ordinances, because we're recognizing that our city's aging. Now, the upside is we have a lot of immigrants, and they bring a lot of young people, and we're younger. That's one of the benefits. But the fact of the matter is this city is aging. And people are, many instances, and I've gone through this experience myself, are taking care of their family members. And those are very challenging moments. And all we're being asked to do is to recognize that. Not open the floodgates, but make a very narrow exemption that provides them a breath of relief, that gives them just that little space so they don't have to become homeless. Because some people are leaving their jobs and counting on this rent. Some people are staying at home and not engaging in their work activity, and they're counting on this flexibility for their narrow circumstance. And that's all that this amendment does. It simply asks for us to recognize the reality of these Angelenos who are here throughout the city, who have a very narrow circumstance, no compromise on the ordinance, and no compromise on the RSO protections. If we believe the RSO is our standard for protecting tenants, that standard remains firm intact with this amendment. I ask for your support on this proposal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Lee.
As I said earlier, if you have a home and you build a secondary unit, they automatically become RSO. It's treated like a duplex. If I live in the house, I should be able, if it's owner-occupied, I should be able to rent out in that room, and when my secondary unit is being rented out. Okay, that I think we all hopefully agree on. And I'm hoping the planning department and HSID will work that out. The second thing, if you're a condo owner and you own that unit, I'm not talking about multiple units, but for those condo owners, am I mistaken? You should be able to rent out a unit in your condo also. You own and rent, you own that condo just like somebody owns their house. But we have to keep it RSO, because if you decide to move and you rent it out, well then it should be under the RSO unit, the laws. But for those of you who have like duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, Councilman Cedillo, I understand what they're talking about, but you're saying, just so I'm clear, if I own a duplex, and I live in one of the stories, and the second story I rent out, that person is now allowed to home share. So I can't, if I understand, so if I have 3 units, I'm not allowed to home share. I'm not allowed to Airbnb any of the 3 units as the owner, under what you're saying, correct? Only the renter is allowed to.
No, he's saying everyone.
I'm just trying to understand.
Correct. The additional renters are allowed to home share, but the RSO protections remain intact. In other words, ensuring no displacement of any renter. So this is a activity for the renter. It's stabilized, as the ordinance says. The rent stabilization ordinance, it stabilizes that tenant in your duplex, thus stabilizing your circumstance, thus not contributing to displacement or homelessness, as has been stated.
I honestly don't know if that addresses the concerns of the people who are with the duplex and threeplex. You can't rent out. You can't Airbnb that room. You have to rent it out to somebody, and then they rent out.
So thank you, Mr. Lee. I have I thought you had a question for planning staff.
Yeah.
So can we ask planning to come?
Yeah. Can we have
Mr. Glesney?
Planning
or
department?
Yeah, everybody. Just everybody.
My only question to you is that someone brought up that if they own a townhome, they're the owner of that townhome, not multiple townhomes. Since they own one townhome, they want to rent a room. They can, if I'm correct, they can apply for an exemption to the RSO to be able to rent out that second room as an Airbnb, correct?
So Tricia Keene, Department of City Planning. The way the ordinance is currently written, and my colleagues can certainly add to this answer as necessary, but the way the ordinance is currently written, home sharing short-term rentals are not allowed in units that are covered by the RSO, and so the RSO does cover properties, and even if you are an owner who occupies that unit, you are still considered to be covered by the ordinance, the rent stabilization ordinance itself.
Just add to that, Matt Gillespie, Planning. We also do have the Housing Department staff here that works on RSO who could also add to this, Anna Ortega. My understanding is it's a temporary exemption. It's a T1 temporary exemption from the RSO that you have to fill out each year, but the building and the unit itself still remains subject to the RSO, and it's just a temporary exemption. But that does not mean that the building is no longer subject to the rent stabilization.
Of course. If I decide to move out and I rent it out, it's still RSO covered, protected. But if I'm the owner, for those condo owners, I'm just trying to address their issues, for those condominium owners, I'm allowed to then Airbnb one of my rooms if I have an exemption.
Just to follow up, Mr. Lee, under what we just passed in number 11, just prior to this, as I understand it, and I consider this a follow-up to your question, what we just allowed is we allowed for owner-occupied RSO built units. They can rent out a room there in their unit. So if it's a condo and it's your condo, you can, if 11 stands and becomes law, we've now fixed that problem under number 11. Is that correct? And
Correct. So right now, Anna Ortega, Housing Department, Director of Rent Stabilization. Councilman Blumenfield is correct. If the motion or ordinance amendment were adopted, then owner-occupied RSO units could be shared. Right now, they cannot. There is a blanket prohibition on short-term renting or home sharing RSO units, whether or not they're owner-occupied.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. So I also need some clarification and perhaps some light shed on a distinction or contradiction that I see with what's before us. So have we, in number 11, taken care of the issue that I think there's broad agreement on, if you own and live in a house, whether you have 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, an ADU, or whatever, you should, the opinion that you should be able to home share those units in whatever form they take, I believe we took care of with item number 11. Is that the case? Is that your understanding?
Tricia Keene, yes, that is our understanding of the intent of what you adopted in item 11. And so if the ordinance is amended as directed by that motion, that would be the result.
Take care of that. And so it takes care of this business of, I have a 3-bedroom house and I can rent out more than 1 bedroom at a time. Does it take care of that? All right. So we'll just put a pin in that because we need to come back to that before November 1st. But the clarification on the motion put forward to us so passionately and eloquently by Mr. Cedillo, whose energy to solve problems I really appreciate and admire. Here's the distinction that I would love clarification or your understanding of. It distinguishes renters who rent in RSO units. It makes a distinction between a renter who lives in a building where the owner of that building happens to also live in that building, and a renter in an RSO unit of 4 units, 8 units or less, where the owner doesn't live in that building.
You're right.
Right. So I'm just wondering what the material distinction between those renters are, because otherwise you open up the entire RSO market to home sharing, which we committed to not do. So I just want to get from you your understanding of it and see if my understanding matches yours. 4 or less. But if the owner doesn't live there, which is not something most people think about when they move into a triplex, duplex, or fourplex. If the owner doesn't live there, I can't use Airbnb. But if right next door in a building that's the same effective building and the owner does live there, my neighbors who are also renters in RSO would be able to use it.
Arthi Varma, Department of City Planning, yes, that is how the motion is drafted. It would apply to buildings that are 4 or less in that particular situation.
Right, and it would distinguish between, if I'm a tenant and I live in a building, one more time, I live in a building and the owner also happens to live in a unit, I get a benefit that my neighbor in the next building over where the owner doesn't live in their building doesn't get that benefit. And I don't have a strong sense of the rationale for such a distinction.
And could we ask the city attorney if that does not open us up to some legal liabilities in terms of equal protection of the law, if we were to do something like that? If the audience, we're trying to have a discussion here, it's not about yays and boos, we're trying to get facts, so if the city attorney could opine on that question.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, that's something we would certainly have to look at. We're just hearing this today, so that's something we'd like to look at.
A rational approach. Thank you.
Yeah, well, but I think it's a real it's an issue that we do need. It's not out of left field. It's a real issue that we might have to look into because it might subject us to a new liability under the equal protection.
Mr.
And let me suggest to you why this is the preferred policy and also why it would be legal. Because we are making a distinction between a homeowner, owner-occupied duplex, and a person who owns properties and doesn't live in them. That there is a real clear distinction. And in this city, there are people who buy and accumulate properties and don't live in them. And they're homeowners and they own properties to make profit. Okay. I'm making that distinction from people who own and live in their property. And that is a big difference.
But we're talking about the benefit that you're extending to renters, not the ones you're extending. No, there's no objection to homeowners. Right. I think by anybody.
Right. And why is that beneficial, right? Because if the whole policy is about avoiding displacement, if the whole policy is about stabilizing the city of Los Angeles, then at the micro level, it should also apply. And so what I'm saying to you, that we're making a distinction between, why does this building get a benefit? Because the person lives there. There's something unique and distinct about a person who lives there and a person who owns 4-plexes and 6-plexes and a 20-unit building, etc. And that's the reality, as you know and we know in our communities. There is a distinction between the people who are here today and others who are not. And so why does that inure a benefit to the tenant, is your question? Or why is that tenant distinct? Because we are about stabilizing, in particular, those units. We don't worry about displacement in the other units because we know that those people aren't cash strapped. We know they have enough capital that they're not living and paying into their building. We know that these are people who have the money to buy a 4-plex or a 6-plex or whatever the case may be. They're not in the same circumstance as owner-occupied buildings. And that's a distinction that we have to make a policy choices important and relevant to us here in the city of Los Angeles, the small owners, like we do with small businesses. With small businesses, we do a lot of things because we value small businesses in our community. They're stabilizers. I say let's transfer that same value to owner-occupied buildings and value it the same way as we do small businesses because they stabilize our community, including the tenants. Those tenants that are there. Yes, there's a neighbor who doesn't get to do that, but that's because they're renting from a person who's got a very stable situation, right? You own that building and you don't live there. That means you've got enough cash that you don't have to live there to stabilize it. On the other hand, the person who lives in an owner-occupied is part of that very small community that is stabilizing it. That's the reality in this city, whether it's in the 9th District or the 1st, Highland Park, Lincoln Heights, South LA, West Side. There are circumstances like that. I'm just saying, let's just recognize that.
That's 30 years in the game, ladies and gentlemen. Very good, Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Blumenfeld.
No, you're inuring the benefit to the renter,
Yes.
the owner of that building.
The city.
The owner of that building, the owner-occupied person is going to get the benefit regardless. But whether or not his tenants can short-term rent or not doesn't change the amount of rent that owner gets.
Correct.
And so you're distinguishing between renters of one building or another based on who the owner is.
Yes. Yes.
You're inuring a benefit to renters, not to the owner. So it doesn't actually benefit the owner-operator.
It
All right,
benefits
so-
the owner-occupier
so
and
I
the
think
city because it stabilizes that small community.
So I think through much discussion, we've gotten to the kernel of our of the contention that we have before us today. I, for one, am not prepared to move forward with this motion today, but we have a motion before us by Mr. Cedillo. So I'll ask if there's no other burning discussion, Mr. Lee. If there's no other burning discussion, we'll ask if there's a second for this motion. How long do we wait, Ms. City Attorney? All right, so this motion lacks a second. So we will table it. Well, thank you, Mr. Mejia, and we will move to item.
So can I just clarify, Terry
Yes.
Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office? So you're talking about not moving forward on item 12?
Yes.
Can we table it then? May I move to table?
So he's made a motion to revisit it at a later time.
Yep.
I'll second that motion.
Second as well.
All right.
And then just to clarify on item 11 is not calling for an ordinance, it's calling for recommendations and a report on those recommendations.
I think we wanted to call for the ordinance.
Well, it's not agendized that way.
So
So I think it should, before you can do that, I think you should agendize it that way if you're calling for an ordinance. Wasn't the original motion.
well, can we legally call for the ordinance, or are you saying that we can't do that?
Well, I think you need
Can't
to
amend
do
it
a
to
new, I think it should be a new motion that says you want to do this as an ordinance.
Okay, well, I guess can we do it to next week and hear it as an ordinance next week?
So now we need,
Oh. Okay, you could send it to council for a recommendation that they initiate the ordinance.
Okay.
Excellent.
That's the way we'll go. I mean, that's my recommendation.
we're taking such an action. Thank you. All right, and now we have before us a motion to, and let's call it 30 days, reconsider item number 12. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any objection? Seeing none, that'll be the order on item number 12. All right, thank you so much. All right, now we'll call on folks who've signed up for multiple items. You'll have 2 minutes each to speak. All right. All right, we have Corey Schmidt, Susan Roca, Lynn Nguyen, Babak Nafasai, Benjamin Speed, Bert R., Daniel Kaufman. Come on up. If I've called your name, come on up. You have 2 minutes to speak on any items that you signed up on and any other issue pertinent to this committee. We'll ask folks to quietly leave the building. We respect that we still got items to cover. Yes, sir.
Hello. Hi, I'm here on item 9. I'm the attorney for the appellants on agenda item 9. So I'm not sure if this
So
is
you should come. You should come back. We'll call you up when that item comes.
That's just a question. Get it, understand it. And he made it.
All right. Corey Schmidt for the record. We're having a lively conversation. I like it. It's been a healthy debate, good talks, so I think it's all positive today. Sounds pretty good. Pretty happy. So we've got a couple of items on the agenda for historic designation. The one in Playa, I mean, sounds okay. It seems like they just want some protection from people building giant stuff around them, or having their place giant at least. Be interested to see what kind of cultural stuff they got. The one on 5th and Rose, also they're really blowing up that area, so it's like I kind of understand why they want to kind of put a protection on that. And the vape shop on Sunset Boulevard, kind of iffy, whatever about it. I've been there a couple of times, but it's also kind of an empty lot. So, okay, and then I'm pretty stoked that you guys are actually listening a little bit. We got 2 items, number 5 and 8, for 100% affordable housing on Hart Street. So I believe that this is a good step in the right direction to trying to help our rent pricing problem. And then the next one is the Expo Corridor Transit Neighborhood Plan, and this is the one that's kind of been the beef with me for a while. And so they've got subdivisions coming in Latuna, like Tahunga, Sunland area, and I'm just curious, why don't we make those areas the high-rise stuff? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we tend to build all the high-rises and everything in the populous area, but why don't we put them out there as well? I see a little bit of a difference there. And then the Dodger Stadium improvements for accessibility, I'm for that. I just don't want to see the area get too gentrified if there's anything like that involved. So, but like everything today.
My name is Bert. I'm a little lost about the last amendment you guys either modified or postponed. I have a duplex. Sir, Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee. I'm talking. I'd like to have some attention here, please. I have a duplex. I'm in West LA. My brother and I have owned the property for 23 years. Never rented it out. We're both on title. So are you saying that I can?
You live there?
I live there. Yes, my brother lives there. Okay? Sure, it's an RSO property. I've never rented out to anyone. My brother goes back and forth to visit his autistic kid, and he brings him back for therapy. It gives us the ability to pay the bills, pay the mortgage, but not having a long-term tenant. If I had a long-term tenant, then I don't see my brother for years. So I'm asking you guys to figure this out really easy. It's not like flying to the moon. It's simple stuff. Your ordinance is wrong. You guys have written this up wrong. It affects thousands of people. All I'm asking is either modify it, delay it, and think about and bring everybody together to kind of, brainstorm and do it right without affecting people. I agree. Airbnb has not been a real good player in this. They should have done home verification in the very beginning, but they didn't. This is where the problem came. All they had to do was have the MLS work with them so they know it's a big 16-story apartment building or a condominium that has a HOA. To me, I'm going to be sacrificed. I'm going to lose my home. Never been in the housing market. Never been any place except my family. Help me. Help a lot of people. We're all trying to just make ends meet here. It's not our fault that Airbnb has not helped you guys. But don't make us the scapegoats.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Speed. I live with my family in a 1,300 square foot owner-occupied duplex that we effectively use.
Did I just call your name?
Benjamin Speed, yes.
Did I just call it?
Yes.
Okay.
I live with my family in a 1,300 square foot owner-occupied duplex we effectively use as a single family home. Our extended family live with us anywhere between 3 and 9 months of the year, and in between that time we do short-term rental on the second unit. From November 1st, we're not allowed to do any short-term rental because we are deemed to be under RSO. As there is no way we are going to do long-term rental on our other unit due to our family situation, we are now looking at losing 25% of our yearly income. This income helps us to afford our mortgage and allows us to keep our home. Without it, our choices become severely limited in many aspects of life. We are literally a mum and pup host. The RSO limitation on hosting unduly and unfairly affects the thousands of mum and pup hosters like me and my family compared to single-family homeowners. I urge the Council to support the amendment and call for its swift and immediate implementation. Please, thank you very much.
I would like to thank Mr. Cedillo and you guys for trying to hash out that, but you can see how confused you guys were. Think how it is for us. All right? I'm just trying to especially talk to Mr. Blumenfield about that delineation between a person who just was able to buy a duplex or a triplex, and we just want to have that right to be able to rent out some rooms in the other unit to cover our mortgage. But to lump us in together with these big landlords, or the people like at the Ellison and stuff like that, you're just saying, whether it's a renter or not, there is a difference between an owner-occupied. I scraped together to not be a renter, to live and bought a duplex. And if that person moves out, why can't I rent the duplex on a short term? They're protected under the RSO anyway. I can't just evict you if you're existing there to move in an Airbnb. So enforce the existing RSO laws, like one woman who said, oh, I saw a blue shirt who kicked me out and moved in an Airbnb person. Well, you know, the existing RSO should have protected her. You shouldn't have to add more laws to more protect her. She's protected under the RSO. She should have contacted somebody, housing or something, and said, hey, I'm being illegally evicted. So, if anything, RSO people are more protected than non-RSO people. If I'm a non-SR landlord, I can just move you out and start Airbnb like hell. But if I scrape together to buy an old duplex, I can't. That's not fair. Fair protection under the law, that's not fair. I can afford a brand new building. I can do whatever I want. I mean, I'm generalizing, but if it's not protected by the RSO, I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
I Len Wynn, Planning Deputy for Councilmember Mike Bonin. Wanted to speak on a few items. On items 2 and 3, the council member supports monument status. He supports the recommendation of the Cultural Heritage Commission for items 2 and 3. With regards to item 7, the Exposition Corridor Neighborhood Transportation Specific Plan, he also supports that and thanks the department for incorporating the 5 requested revisions from June 2018. And then on item 10, the council member urges, well, you already did it, so never mind. But he supports one key component, the prohibition on short-term rentals and units subject to the city's rent stabilization ordinance, and he urges enforcement without delay. Thank you.
All right. I haven't called you yet.
Oh, okay.
So now, Mr. Mejia, we'll move to items number 2 and 3. If you could read those into the record. There's a recommendation that we receive those items on consent.
Yes, Councilman. Item 2 is a report from the Cultural Heritage Commission to include the Dodd Playa del Rey residence as a historic cultural monument. Item 3, Councilman, again a report from the Cultural Heritage Commission to include the Morris Abrams Chateau as a historic cultural monument.
All right. Those are items number 2 and 3. A recommendation that we take those items on consent. If there's no objection, that'll be the order. Hearing none, that's the order. Can we move to item number 9, Mr. Mejia?
Yes. Let's see here. Item 9, Councilman. This is an appeal that has been filed by Eric Otsea. He's filing a CEQA appeal relative to improvements that were approved for Dodger Stadium.
All right. We have a report from the Department of City Planning.
Good afternoon, council members. Courtney Shum with the Department of City Planning. As mentioned, the item before you is an appeal of a plan approval for Dodger Stadium. The application is for a program plan for the Dodgers that will involve renovations and improvements to the stadium center field, along with enhancements to pedestrian circulation, security, accessibility, visitor amenities, and sponsorship signage. The goal of this project is to upgrade Dodger Stadium to meet the modern standards of a Major League Baseball stadium for today, all the while creating a secure and accessible environment that is optimized for the fan experience. It should be noted that Dodger Stadium has been regulated by conditional use since 1960, when the stadium was first authorized to be built. This approval includes conditions on seat count, transportation, lighting, sound systems, special events, and signage, among other things. And the project before you will not be deviating from any of those restrictions. What this means is that the capacity of the stadium will not change beyond the 56,000 seats originally approved in 1960, and there will be no changes to how pedestrians or vehicles navigate to and from the site. The operations and intensity of the stadium will essentially remain the same. In fact, of the more than 900,000 square feet contained within the stadium, only about 12,000 square feet of net new floor area will be added to accommodate new retail, concessions, restrooms, and walkways. This represents only a 1.4% increase in the total amount of floor area allocated to the stadium. As detailed in the report submitted by planning staff to the council file on October 17th, the appeal submitted by Mr. Eric Otsea on behalf of the neighbors of Chavez Ravine is without merit. The director did not err or abuse their discretion in determining that the project is categorically exempt from SEQRA review or in making the mandated land use entitlement findings. These actions have been well supported by evidence in the record. There's been no violation of due process in how the initial decision was rendered, and further, the appellant has not provided any evidence to substantiate the claims against the project. That said, staff recommends that this body deny the appeal, sustain the Directors of Planning's decision, and determine, along with the related modified CEQA findings, that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines under Classes 1, 3, 5, 11, and 23. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Any discussion, members? If not, we will hear from our appellant representative for 5 minutes. or 4 minutes and 59 seconds or less.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Aknefisi. I'm a land use attorney and I represent neighbors of Chavez Ravine. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. I believe that, as the staff report indicates, there has been a set of conditions that apply to Dodger Stadium since 1960s. Since that time, however, this body has approved a series of changes, so-called enhancements to the both operation and the infrastructure and equipment at Dodger Stadium. In each case, those changes, those operational changes or the structural changes were not reviewed as required by California Environmental Quality Act. In each case, the changes were deemed exempt. So now, after 50, 60 years of operation, none of these impacts have adequately been considered. You recently commissioned, 2 years ago, commissioned the traffic study. The traffic study came out just last week or about 10 days ago. And that study basically confirms what you probably know already, that conditions such as traffic around Dodger Stadium affecting the neighborhoods where my client members live have become bogged down with traffic from the stadium. The events have become louder. The sound system has been greatly enhanced. All these changes have been done without the transparency required by the Environmental Quality Act. And now here's another example. One of the main problems with the way the city has handled this case is that the project description doesn't even give us a real sense of what the changes will be. If you listen to the staff report just minutes ago, it was all in very euphemistic terms about enhancing the visitor experience in upgrading the stadium. But you didn't get a real sense of, well, how many traffic trips does that add? How does that change the circulation patterns in the neighborhood? How much lighting on these billboards, these lit up billboards, are you adding, and how does that affect the neighbors? It's high time that you stop approving these kind of changes without any environmental review, behind closed doors between your staff and the Dodger staff and management, and involve the public in the public process where the cumulative impact of all the changes you've approved are transparently discussed and considered. Staff has insisted that in comparison to the overall size and scope of the Dodgers operation, excuse me, these changes are negligible. What I'm here to tell you is that CEQA and the cumulative impact review under CEQA was intended to address exactly this kind of situation where incremental changes have been made over time without the agency ever stopping that process to take a comprehensive look at what has happened in the past and what's likely to happen in the future. It doesn't matter that the changes here in and of themselves may not be considered particularly significant. What is important is the extent to which these changes, in addition to the changes that have happened as a result of your previous decisions and the changes in the environment, in the conditions of traffic and other conditions around the stadium, the extent to which these changes in combination have become significant and have significantly affected the quality of life and quiet enjoyment of the properties that the members of the group I represent have been denied in the past 20, 30 years. So I urge you to not kick the can down the road and stop the bus, and let's have a meaningful consideration of.
Thank you so much. We'll hear now from the applicant representative for 4 minutes and 59 seconds. Representatives. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Claire Branafsky, Glazer Weil for applicant LA Dodgers. Our presentation includes Janet Marie Smith, Senior Vice President for Planning and Development of the Dodgers, who will present the project, and I'll come back and address the legal issues that have been raised. We also have our consultant team available to answer questions: Pat Gibson of Gibson Transportation, Travis Cullen of Envicom, and Kimberlina Wedham, our development consultant.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Marie Smith. I'm the Vice President of Planning and Development for the Dodgers. I'm here to present the project to you. I wanted to just give you a quick overview of how important this is to both Dodger Stadium and to the city of Los Angeles. Our goal is to have this project completed by March the 26th, the first game of the 2020 season, the season that we'll be hosting the All-Star Game here in Los Angeles for the first time in 40 years. It's an important event not only for the Dodgers, but also for the city of Los Angeles, with over 2,500 media covering this event worldwide, and with an economic impact to the city of $90 million. The project that we're here to discuss today is the Centerfield Pavilion projects. The two outfield pavilions are independent structures that were built separately from Dodger Stadium's main structure. We're looking to bring those up to today's codes, both seismic as well as ADA accessibility. We're looking to create the proper kind of food service, restrooms, and circulation space to allow those to be completely accessible to anyone in the stadium. This area is immediately adjacent to our metro stop, which is right here on the site. So of the 350 acres of Dodger Stadium property, this is an important gathering point for the thousands of fans who take the metro buses from Union Station to South Bay every game to make this more accommodating to our fans. We're quite sensitive to our neighbors in the community. As you heard, this project will not change our capacity, which has been the same since 1992, 56,000. It will not change the way metro buses, auto entrances, bicycles, or pedestrians enter the stadium. It will allow us a safer passage for all of those who are inside the stadium. We're grateful to the help of the Los Angeles Building and Safety Department, which has been an amazing partner of ours, the Fire Department, the Police Department, Planning and Development, and DOT, all of whom have been consulted numerous times during the course of planning this. We're also grateful to our neighbors, particularly the Echo Park Planning Commission, Planning Council, who we've worked with and will continue to work with over the next coming years.
Let's try and fit this in the time. In response to the appeal, your planning staff has given a very thorough written report, and we want to thank staff, and we've also provided written information. In regard to the categorical exemption before you, this project is typical of the type of projects to which the city applies categorical exemptions, where minor changes are being made, no change in capacity or operations of the existing stadium. The stadium was approved in 1960 with a very thoughtful CUP with numerous conditions designed to protect neighbors, and none of these conditions have been changed in 60 years. The facilities have merely been upgraded to meet modern standards, signage has been added, and we've respected the original operations and design of the stadium throughout. We've existed near residential uses, again, for these 60 years. Here, the closest residence is more than 1,300 feet from the stadium itself, a far greater distance than many large-scale commercial uses throughout the city that are adjacent to residences. And we want to stress that the Dodgers works hard to stay in touch with their immediate neighbors on issues of concern. Through the Neighborhood Council, other stakeholder groups, and Dodger-sponsored briefings, the Dodgers are in constant communication on an ongoing basis and committed to resolving any issues as they arise. The issues before you that have been raised are part of the existing conditions of the stadium, and they are not part of the project before you. We've added information in the record, including a traffic study that was approved by DOT to show you that there are no changes in traffic circulation or vehicular entrances based on this project. And on the basis of this additional information, we request that you adopt the modified findings, which were given through staff, to demonstrate the information in the record and the additional CEQA exemptions. And we ask you to deny the appeal, and our team is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll begin public comment on this matter. We'll start with Mr. Ronnie Green.
Dodgers project. This past August, I was invited onto the field. The lift didn't work, and I had to go to center field to travel to get onto the field. Please, it's inadequate. I've been a fan and going to Dodger Stadium since 1969. Please deny the appeal. It's necessary. It's 19 years. 2019, it should be approved. There's no elevators working. The lift stopped midway up by the visitors' dugout. I went to center field and my seat was behind the Dodgers dugout. That's unacceptable.
Thank you.
Please deny the appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's your time. Mr. Ron Miller, Mr. Shamari Davis, Xochitl Manzanilla, Maribel Preciado, Josefina Conchola.
Good afternoon. Ron Miller, Executive Secretary of the LA Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. Here with some of the affiliates. They represent over 140,000 hardworking men and women, and they do the work at Dodger Stadium. And it's very important, as you've heard from the gentleman that was ahead of me, that we keep up with the ADA compliance codes at Dodger Stadium. This is a matter of keeping up with infrastructure in the city. This facility is a city jewel. It brings in money to the city, so we got to keep it up with modern times. We have other venues in the city that we haven't kept up, namely the convention center. We're getting ready to do that, but it's been far too long. So it's a must to keep up with these projects. Please deny the appeal and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shamari Davis. I'm a business rep for IBEW, Local 11 Electricians Union, and we are here to support this project because we want to light it up. That's what we do. I was there for the first game of the playoff, for the high, and for the last game. But that's okay. We are going to build it so that when they come back next year, they have a better venue, they can win. But not only that, I think it's really great that the ADA part of this project, so that fans like the first gentleman, which was really touching, can come and be able to enjoy that venue just like all the rest of us can. So it's really important. Dodgers have been a great LA resident. They use local hire. They use a lot of the folks here to help build that venue. So let's push it forward so that everybody can enjoy the LA Dodger experience. So let's win next year.
Hello, my name is Josefina Conchola. I'm the Associate Director of Partnerships for the University of California, Berkeley's Puente Project. I'm also a very lifetime Dodger fan, as my father says, Los Dodgers. I am here to support the Centerfield project. Puente is an amazing an academic preparation program serving over 17,000 students statewide, but part of our service area is in Los Angeles, LA Unified. I'm here because we want to support because we have students and faculty that are wheelchair, that are prone to wheelchair and have limitations that are greatly benefit, and the improvements would greatly benefit the ADA proposed improvements, specifically those Puente students and staff that are confined to wheelchairs. Give the current physical structure of Chavez Ravine, they are also confined to the limitations accessing many of the areas. So I'm here to support the Dodgers and the ADA improvements. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Good afternoon. My name is Xochitl Manzanilla, and I am a representative of the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. I am from this organization, and I come from William Mead. It's one of the projects, one of the 14 projects of the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. I live in William Mead, and I come with a group from William Mead, even with a committee from William Mead Homes. Nickname of William Mead is the Dogtown. I don't know you know about that. Okay, I'm here today to express my overwhelming support for the Dodgers Certified project. This is very much needed among the people who need services for handicapped, you know, and
Thank you.
I support them. Please, I ask you to.
Thank you. That your time expired.
All right.
So,
Thanks.
we appreciate you. John Warden, Jose Miranda, Everett Glenn, Janet Marie Smith, Kimberlina Wedham, Travis Cullen.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Maribel Preciado. Yo vengo a decirles aquí que yo apoyo el...
Hold on, we need to get translation.
Oh. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Maribel Preciado.
Good afternoon, my name is Maribel Preciado.
Yo vengo aquí a decirles que apoyo el proyecto
I am here to tell you that I am in support of this project.
de los Dodgers porque yo quisiera poder
That is the Dodgers project.
disfrutar un buen juego de los Dodgers en cualquier parte del estadio.
I would like to enjoy of going to the stadium in any part of the stadium
Con
that
mi
I may be.
familia.
I'd like to be there with my family
Porque siempre estamos separados.
because we always have to sit in separate seats.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Warden. I'm the founder and executive director of No Vet Alone, a veterans 501c3 suicide prevention program based in Los Angeles County. Los Angeles County is home to one of the largest veteran disabled populations in the United States. The ADA, American with Disability Act, was passed in 1990. Many of our disabled veterans attend Dodger games on a regular basis, as each night the Dodgers host a hero of the game. They also host a Veterans Day batting practice on the field and many other community service in support of veterans in this great city. The stadium is iconic, but it must be updated to accommodate those disabled veterans that want to attend those games with their families, and we have one such veteran here today. I'd like to introduce Jose Miranda, United States Navy, lost his leg in an accident on an aircraft carrier and was a hero of the game back in May on Military Appreciation Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jose Miranda. Like John Warden said, I'm here with No Vet Alone. We're a suicide prevention organization through peer-to-peer support and also, attending recreational and social events, kind of like the one he mentioned back in May. For us, our social events are key, where we support one another and we also meet other people outside of the military personnel community, where kind of like the woman here that just stated she would like to attend a Dodger game where she can access the whole entire stadium. I'm here to support the project in the concourse. I'm here and urge you guys here to approve the event because these social activities and these games also increase the quality of our lives as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
My name is Everett Glenn. I'm the founder and president of ESP Education Leadership Institute. We turn boys of color and those from under-resourced communities and schools into scholars. 100% of our boys are high school ready. They take algebra by 8th grade. They test proficient or advanced in language arts and reading by 9th grade. They're high school ready entering 9th grade. And we couldn't, this is in a city where 75% of those same boys don't even qualify to apply to college. We couldn't do that without the support of the Dodgers, and for that reason alone, I support the project. In addition, I know that most teams are holding cities hostage and threatening to move, and this project is being privately financed, which is another reason I think that you should approve it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Daniel Kaufman, Tony Collins, Lydia Moreno, Olivia Lee, Yvette Grajeda, David Siegel, Will Wright.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Collins. I'm part of the Zeta Rho Foundation, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Omega Mentor Program. We're here to overwhelmingly support the project by the LA Dodgers, our community partners. The Dodgers have been involved with us in terms of helping our students passionately help our students get their grades. We work with the Dodgers LA Read program. They have provided resources that allow us to give thousands of dollars of scholarships to kids of African Americans. There is a great project that in fact will help the ADA disabilities individuals enhance the project, enhance the stadium. We overwhelmingly support the Dodgers as they have provided opportunities way beyond for our students. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Olivia Liu, the LA Area Chamber of Commerce, here in support of the project and in opposition of the appeal. For more than 60 years, the Dodgers have been an integral part of Los Angeles. Through education programs, youth sports initiatives, neighborhood ticket donations, and various year-round volunteer efforts, the Dodgers continue to be a good community steward. The Dodgers are also central to the economic heart of our city. According to the Los Angeles Sports Council and the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, the sports industry in Greater Los Angeles generates $6.2 billion in economic output, supports nearly 40,000 jobs, and contributes roughly $250 million in state and local taxes. Additionally, this project is privately funded and will provide ADA-compliant accessibility to Dodger fans. We'd like to thank staff for the hard work on this item, and we urge you to support this project and to reject the appeal. Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Siegel. I'm the president and CEO of the Los Angeles Sports Council. We're a private, nonprofit organization which supports economic and community development through the promotion of spectator sports programs in the Los Angeles and Orange County areas. I'm here today to express my overwhelming support of the Dodgers center field project. This is a much-needed, privately funded improvement to the stadium that will improve the fan experience without changing the venue's capacity or any operations. It's an exciting project that's going to allow the Dodgers to serve all fans of all ages and abilities by adding ADA accessibility to the pavilions and entrances while improving security and circulation around the ballpark. With the 2020 All-Star Game coming to Los Angeles for the first time in 40 years, it's imperative that we show the city and venue off in the best light, and this project is going to help us do just that. Moreover, the Dodgers are central to the economic heart of the city, generating considerable revenue and job opportunities for the region. It's estimated that the economic impact of the All-Star Game alone is $90 million. As such, I respectfully urge you to deny this appeal.
Your time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Lydia Moreno, neighbors of Chavez Ravine. Ladies and gentlemen,
one more time,
we're
can
talking
you tell
about...
us your name?
I'm sorry?
One more time, can you repeat your name?
Lydia Moreno.
Thank you.
We're talking about $100 million renovation. The conditional use permit, which I pulled up and I have here, mentions nothing about bars, restaurants, or anything else that has been added to this stadium since 1960. Okay. On any game day, Dodger Stadium is the largest bar in the city of Los Angeles, serving thousands of alcoholic beverages. This creates an unpredictable situation in our community, and it continues post-games as fans depart even more intoxicated and create havoc on our streets and properties. This is unbearable and unacceptable to those of us living in Solano Canyon, one of the oldest residential communities. Let me remind you of the Battle of Chavez Ravine. You know, the affordable housing project?
Thank you.
Instead, we got a
That's your-
stadium and freeways.
That's your time. John Huck, Judy Camian. Yes.
Hello, my name is Yvette Grajeda, and I'm also a member of Friends of Chavez Ravine. I've lived in Solano Canyon for over 2 decades now, and I can tell you firsthand that we have definitely been impacted by the Dodgers and their growing numbers of fans. Trust me, I get it. Dodgers are good for LA, and they treat people very well. As you could see, a lot of these people are advocating for this thing to be pushed through. One thing I want you to know is the Dodgers aren't very good to their next door neighbor. We've asked them time and time again to consider our frustrations and the things that we are deeply impacted throughout the season, and we are shunned over and over again. It's not fair. The Dodgers are a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we're the little dog here. And we're just asking for you guys to consider, let them go through what everyone else
Thank
has
you.
to go through.
Thank you. That's your time.
We should.
That's your time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Will Wright, and I'm here in front of you today as a constituent of Council District 1. I live in Angelino Heights, within about a 5-minute walk to Dodger Stadium. I'm here to support the project. The Dodgers have been a great neighbor to all of us. They reach out to us constantly. They are very accessible. They are willing to listen and willing to improve access. And as someone that can walk to the stadium, I want to let everyone know that the Dodgers are a community asset, and I'm here to support the project and encourage you to do so as well. Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Cedillo, for representing the interest of Angelino Heights.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's John Huck. I'm a 27-year resident of Solano Canyon. In the last 4 to 5 years, the Dodgers have greatly increased the volume and frequency of announcements and music during each game. They regularly blast this noise at 5 to 10 minute intervals through each game, disturbing the peace and quiet that we used to enjoy. The conditional use permit that allows the Dodgers to operate in Chavez Ravine explicitly prohibits this type of amplified noise. Our neighbors have sent numerous emails to the Dodgers to address this, which are usually ignored or brushed off. I don't know who's communicating with them, but they're not communicating with us. I cannot understand why they get a pass on environmental review when they plan on installing a brand new sound system which will double the number of speakers at the stadium. This is noise pollution of an easy preventable type. The Dodgers need to be held to the same rules as every other business in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Camian, neighbors of Chavez Ravine. I moved to Solano Canyon over 30 years ago, and I loved going to baseball games at the stadium and following the team. In those days, you could hear the crack of the bat, the base coaches talking to players, and your fellow fans conversing between innings. But under the current ownership, things have not been so peaceful. Changes were made to the PA system that amplified the sound levels within and beyond the stadium that detrimentally impacted our community, coupled with their frequent use of fireworks. Many of us reached out to the Dodgers in the city again and again to address this issue, but were met with indifference or rebuffed. Concurrently, traffic has exploded. With the advent of ride-sharing services that doubles the number of rides and prevalent use of wayfinding apps, the streets are often at gridlock. This is not a minor improvement. It is a $100 million investment and deserves careful review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Inez Gomez, Eric Oy.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ines Gomez. I am the RAC president with the William Mead.
Un momento. We get translation.
Thank you. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre
Hi,
es
good
Ines
afternoon.
Gómez.
My name is Ines Gomez.
Yo represento a la comunidad de William Mead. Somos vecinos de Dodger Stadium.
I represent the community of William Mead, and we are fans of the Dodgers and the stadium.
Estoy aquí para, estamos a favor sobre el proyecto porque es un beneficio para todas las personas con diferentes discapacidades.
I am here in support of the project. I think this is a good, something good for people of all ages.
Es un buen proyecto.
It's a good project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Otzi. I'm a resident of Solano Canyon. And I want to go on record as saying that I am not against the proposal. I think it's probably very much needed, and it looks like a good proposal. However, I and others do take issue with how the city is here granting the Dodgers a waiver of the required secret requirements. Surely I, as a business owner, would never be granted such a pass were I to improve some 13,000 square feet of public access space. I would also not be permitted to move forward on such a project without having one public meeting in the council district wherein the project lies, in this case, Council District 1. This is in contrast to what was just set up here 10 minutes ago by the Dodger representative. It seems also that the project is phase one of a multi-phase project. Are we to expect each piecemeal new phase that the city will again waive any secret requirements? In short, I'd just like to say the traffic is horrendous, the systems are, PA system is loud.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That concludes your time. We'll ask staff, before we turn it over to Mr. Cedillo, if there are any specifics from public comment that you'd like to address.
I believe most of the concerns have been addressed, but I did specifically briefly wanted to talk about cumulative impacts. So the appellant's statements about cumulative impacts are factually incorrect. Environmental impacts are considered based on existing baseline conditions. That means the physical environment as it stands today. Did I do that? Okay. So it's not accurate for the appellant to state that past discretionary projects at Dodger Stadium have not been adequately assessed, and thus this project will result in significant cumulative impacts. Each project preceding this one has been evaluated individually. And
Mr. Spindler, you're disrupting the meeting. It's your first and last warning.
So each project preceding this one has been evaluated individually, and they're separated by years apart. The reality is that technology advances and needs for the stadium evolve over time. That's not the same as projects being piecemealed. What's before you today is a project that has been fully described and assessed consistent with CEQA, and there's substantial evidence in the record to support this. Past projects on the site are not relevant, and there's no... Anyway, there's no evidence in the record. There's no evidence in the record that future projects have failed to be analyzed.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cedillo.
Colleagues, I think you've seen evidence of why the Dodgers are really champions. Without government prodding or advocacy, they are engaging in one of the largest voluntary ADA accessible compliance and retrofits in the nation. And they do this Mr. President, I was saying this is a earth-shaking matter. As the Dodgers go forward with one of the largest ADA compliance projects, retrofits in the entire nation. They do so as I was saying, this is an earth-shaking matter. The Dodgers are going forward with one of the largest ADA compliance retrofits in the nation, and they do so in a voluntary manner. Not like us, we, the City of Los Angeles, actually have to be compelled to comply because it is that challenging to think that you've got to go back, a building built in 1960 before there were ADA requirements, and then to go back and have to rebuild it, to put in elevators where they don't exist, escalators where they don't exist, ramps where they don't exist. Why? Because we want the stadium to be accessible to all Los Angeles and to the entire nation and to all visitors who come and marvel at one of the most spectacular sports and entertainment locations that exist in the world. And yet, while it is a worldly known location, it's also very local. So, for example, this retrofit will also include changing the speakers. So yes, the speakers were built, and we know technology is always changing, and so the control of the air, of the sound, has been limited. But now with new speakers that we can control and direct, we will improve that for the community. In addition, the new retrofits and the new restaurants and the new activities will allow people to stay longer at the stadium so that they're not coming out at the same time, which reduces congestion and traffic, which is a big concern in the surrounding areas. Now, my staff and I personally have met with residents of Solano Canyon. We've been very forthright, brought this to their attention, and the Dodgers have been very forthright and very transparent in bringing this to the attention of the residents and the city at large. This is an extraordinary project. It will be, as all things at Dodger Stadium, union built. It will create jobs. It will bring more tourism, which is a central aspect of our economy, more service, and at the end of the day, it will be a greater contribution to the democratic nature of our community, in that everybody can participate, everybody has access. It is one thing in which the city can be united around during these difficult times, is the contributions, the uniting of what is the experience of being a Dodger fan. And so with that, I ask you on behalf of my district and the city to move this project forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Mejia, we have some findings and an action pursuant to the sentiment put forward by Mr. Cedillo.
Do you want me to read them for the record?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, action 1, to deny the appeal filed by Eric Osea on behalf of the neighbors of Chavez Ravine, thereby sustain the director's decision to approve the exception under CEQA guidelines section 15301, 15303, 15305, 15311, and 15323, and to approve plans to permit improvements related to accessibility, pedestrian circulation, security, guest services, patron amenities, and sponsorship signage in conjunction with the continued operation of the Dodger Stadium with no increase in overall seating capacity, maximum 56,000 seats permitted for the property at 1000 Vince Scully Avenue, subject to conditions of approval and modified CEQA findings. And number 2, find that pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061 and determine based on the whole of the administrative record that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines and the 5 categorical exemptions 15301, 15303, 15305, 15311, 15323, and thereby that there is no substantial evidence demonstrating that an exemption to a categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15300.2 applies.
Thank you so much. It's been moved by Mr. Cedillo. I'll provide a second. There's no discussion. We'll consider the item. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Cedillo, and everybody who's come forward on this issue. Can you read, Mr. Mejia, there's a request to continue item number 6.
Yes, Councilman. Item 6 is a City Planning Commission report relative to a vesting zone change that would construct 201 homes in CD7.
Excellent. So if there's no objection, we'll continue that item and move to item number 4.
As far as the continuance, Councilman, is it to a date certain for number 6? I think it was November 12th. I believe it's November 12th, Councilman.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Item number 4.
Councilman, item 4 is a report from the Cultural Heritage Commission relative to the inclusion of the Fred C. Thompson Building as a historic cultural monument.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. Ken Bernstein with Office of Historic Resources, Department of City Planning. The Fred C. Thompson Building is a 2-story commercial building on Sunset Boulevard.
Pardon me, Mr. Bernstein. Can we ask folks to exit as quietly as they possibly can so we can continue our meeting? Thank you. Mr. Bernstein.
Thank you. The Fred C. Thompson Building is a 2-story building on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, constructed in 1927. The Cultural Heritage Commission recommendation was that the building met 2 of the historic cultural monument criteria. First, as an excellent and intact example of Spanish colonial revival commercial architecture in Hollywood, and as a noteworthy work of master architects Henry Gogarty and Carl Jules Weil, and secondly, for its association with the lives of historic personages, for its connection to film actor Fred C. Thompson, as well as the ventriloquist Edgar Bergen.
Thank you so much. If there's no discussion on this, I've got a couple folks on the queue for public comment. Andrew Ward, Susan Roca. All right. Andrew and Susan seem to trust the wisdom of the committee. So I will move that we concur with the Cultural Heritage Commission and approve the inclusion of the Fred C. Thompson Building located at 6528 through 6540 West Sunset Boulevard in the list of historic cultural monuments. Hearing no objection, it's been seconded by Mr. Blumenfield. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. That takes us to item number 5.
Item 5, Councilman, this is a report from the City Planning Commission relative to zone change, and it also provides various land use incentives for a 100% affordable housing project that would build an 80-unit apartment building in CD3.
Good afternoon, committee members. Renata Ohms with the Department of City Planning. The case before you, item number 5, is a zone change from R1 1VL Rio to RAS 4 1VL Rio. This is for a proposed 100% affordable housing project in Canoga Park. The project includes permanent supportive housing component and on-site supportive services. Staff is available to answer questions.
And not a question, but some comments on this. I'm really proud that this is moving forward. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of meeting the affordable housing needs in the West San Fernando Valley. It's really one of the only 100% affordable housing projects that's ever been proposed in my area, and it's not for a lack of trying, Mr. Cedillo. We have been meeting with affordable housing developers, begging them to come to the district the last couple of years. The only 13 units before this I was able to get, I literally had to take CRA money and spend $1.5 million to purchase the land to get someone to come in. So the fact that we've got this group coming in without that extra enticement, but coming in needing the zone change to build this desperately needed affordable housing is incredibly important, and I'm very strongly supportive of this. Said we've gone to affordable housing folks, offered them public lands, and still it's hard to get folks to bite out in the West Valley where the services aren't and where for a variety of reasons they're not going. So anyway, this is part of the effort that we're doing. We're trying to push inclusionary housing rules in the Warner Center to balance out the growing market rate housing production, which would ultimately be one of the first new inclusionary housing rules in the city in decades. But again, I just wanted to express my happiness with Meta Housing, the fact that they're meeting the valley's needs, that they continue to do that, and that I urge us to move forward with the zone change to make this possible. Thank you.
Excellent. If there's no further comment, it's been moved by Mr. Blumenfeld and seconded by the chair. If there's no discussion, we will approve the recommendation for the zone change for the property located at 6940 Owensmouth Avenue and 21612 West Hart Street. All right, that takes us, Mr. Mejia, to item number 7.
Item 7, Councilman, these are two city attorney prepared ordinances, one to establish the Exposition Corridor Transit Neighborhood Plan, the other one to effectuate zone changes and to modify the boundaries of the West Adams Community Plan Implementation Overlay District, the CPIO.
Good afternoon, committee members. Craig Weber, Department of City Planning staff. The item before you involves the establishment of a specific plan that would be applicable to properties located roughly a half mile from 5 transit stations located on the city's west side. The proposed Expo Corridor specific plan and related actions were heard previously by this body in July of 2018. So what is before the committee today, as mentioned, is the city attorney's final ordinance so that the council may ultimately adopt the specific plan, which, by way of extremely brief summary, establishes a number of new zones throughout the specific plan area, establishes urban design standards that are applicable to most projects within the specific plan area, employs a value capture strategy to ensure that projects are providing affordable housing within the specific plan area, and also effectuates a number of streetscape plans that have been previously adopted. We would like to include, the ordinance has been made public on council file for a number of weeks, and we've received some input of a very technical nature, so would like to suggest, if the committee is amiable, a technical modification that would be applicable to section 1.2.1A5, and it would insert a new subsection that would read, projects with vested rights pursuant to LAMC section 12.26A3 as of the effective date of the specific plan would be exempt from the provisions of the specific plan. So this is a section of the plan that governs what type of work would be exempt, and we want to be sure that it's clear that projects that already have a building permit would be exempt from these newly adopted provisions.
Got it. If there's no discussion, I'll go to public comment on this. I have Linda Allison and Lee Wallach.
Folks, thank you. Lee Wallach here with the Motor Avenue Improvement Association in the Palms area of Los Angeles, one of the densest parts of our city here. We are very, very supportive of TIMP. We work very closely with staff, really over a 2-year process. We didn't like everything we got, but we came up with a good win-win opportunity for everybody. Unfortunately, TOC came in and really blew that out. We really wanted the plans that we had worked together with staff to be implemented, and we had to wait for over 8 months to see TMP here today. We're taking a lot of hits in our neighborhood, folks. Dozens of huge buildings, no police or fire increase. We were really confused when this came out. We thought there was conflicting sections in TOC and then conflicting regulations. We want to make sure that TMP is the law of the land, that it trumps, sorry for that term, but it trumps TOC, period. Please make that happen and get this to consent. We need this to happen really soon.
Thank you so much. If there's no discussion, Mr. Mejia, we have some findings and orders that I'd ask you to read into the record.
Yes. So, one, find that the Exposition Corridor Transit Neighborhood Plan was assessed in the final environmental impact report number ENV 2013-622 EIR, certified on July the 3rd, 2018, and after considering the whole of the administrative record and exercising its independent judgment, the council has made a determination that, based upon substantial evidence, 1, that the project is the same as the one described in the EIR, 2, none of the conditions described in Public Resources Code section 21166 or CEQA Guidelines section 15162 that would require the preparation of a subsequent EIR have occurred, meaning that there are no substantial changes to the project or to the circumstances under which the project will be undertaken, and that there is no new information that was not available at the time of the final EIR when it was certified that would require major revisions to the final EIR or the preparation of a new EIR. To adopt the city attorney prepare ordinances for the establishment of the Exposition Corridor Transit Neighborhood Plan and the related zone boundary changes to the West Adams CPIO, and as stated in the record by the representatives from City Planning, to include new language to Section 121A5 of the Exposition Corridor Transit Neighborhood Plan Ordinance to recognize the new language that projects that have vested rights pursuant to sections of the LAMC Section 1226A3 as of the effective date of this specific plan would be exempt from the provisions of the plan. The city attorney would include this new language into the ordinance and submit it to the council so once it goes to council, those amendments will be embedded in the ordinance.
Excellent. So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Blumenfeld. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order for item number 7. That takes us to item number 8.
Item number 8, Councilman, this is a report from the North Valley APC, and it involves a vesting zone change for a 49-unit multi-family residential apartment building located in CD6.
Yes. Report from Department of City Planning.
Yes, thank you. Laura Frazen Steele, City Planning. The project before you is 100% affordable, exclusive of the manager's unit, and provides permanent supportive housing funded through Proposition HHH and No Place Like Home dollars to house formerly homeless victims of domestic violence and sex trafficking and individuals with a history of mental illness. The 49-unit multifamily residential building is proposed to be located on the northeast corner of Van Nuys Boulevard and Plummer Street in a geographic area where 25% of the population is below the poverty level, as well as addressing the city's homeless crisis. It is important to acknowledge that citywide the number of victims of domestic violence has risen to 13,000. The multifamily building is attractively designed. It contains 49 units, and it includes 1- and 2-bedroom units designed with 2 central courtyards with the units surrounding the courtyards, and it includes a play area for children. Staff recommends approval of the vesting zone change and removal of the building line as requested by the applicant, as well as adoption of the mitigated negative deck and the statutory exemption from CEQA. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
All right, any questions, members? Hearing none, I have one public comment speaker on the queue, Mr. Englander. All right, I don't see Mr. Englander. Mr. Mejia, I'll move that we make a particular findings and approval, if you could read those into the record.
Yes, Councilman, to basically approve the vesting zone change as stated by representatives from City Planning, also the removal of the building line, thereby also approve the M&D and the statutory negative decks.
Excellent. So moved. Second. Seconded by Mr. Blumenfeld. Hearing no objections, that'll be the order. Thank you so much. That leaves us with public comment for folks who requested to speak on multiple items. Is that right?
Did we do multiple items at the beginning, Councilman?
Got a few left over.
Okay.
All right. So I got Mickey Jackson, Andrew Ward, Heather, Hugo Soto, Jeff Cowan, Marta, Wayne from Encino.
That's right. So, let's look at the Brooklyn Dodgers. Those fucking losing bloodsuckers. 1988. The last last time those motherfuckers won anything. They're a bunch of losers, these Dodgers. Then they go and they privatize their games on the Spectrum. So I don't want no goddamn Spectrum. Then they raise the prices. Then they sell it to Fox. And then they sell it to Frank McCourt, and the murderer Steve Selberoff takes over, and then the Guggenheims. So the Dodgers are not a family-owned operation. They're a multinational conglomerate based in Chicago, raping and pillaging our land and charging too much, including $12 for a non-beef hot dog. Now, who the hell charges $12 when you don't have a single piece of meat in your hot dog? Now, you ask goddamn Mayor Garcetti if he goes and he has a hot dog with no meat in it, and he tell you no. So that's why every time you giving these bloodsuckers shit, you give them free police, you goddamn raping Solano, you're raping the goddamn Chinatown with all the traffic and congestion. What we getting? We get nothing except a 5-4 series and a loss to the Washington fucking Nationals. How are you doing this, Gil Cedillo? They lost to the goddamn Washington Nationals. I say make a motion to send the Dodgers back to Brooklyn and tear down that fucking stadium and give it back to the affordable housing. Fuck the Dodgers.
You all right?
Let's go, Dodgers.
All right, I have a Suzette Kitselma, Jasmine Garcia, Isaac Hong, Adeline Bertha. All right? Don't see any of those folks. Can you confirm that that concludes our business for this afternoon and early evening, Mr. Mejia?
Yes, sir. That concludes the meeting.
Excellent. We're adjourned. Thank you all so much.
All right, nice job, Mr. Chair.